Alright, we're at 8 minutes. We can officially start if y'all are ready.
Hell yeah. Let's get this underway. Alrighty. If it's not already obvious, I'm GhostKumo.
I am Osey889.
And I'm GhostKumo.
Hi, GhostKumo.
Nah, you guys know who I am, obviously, if you guys are here. So, yeah, this is the Limit Break prediction show. We've done this I've done one of these every single year the games list has been a thing.
In 2015?
I did one the very first year on
Nice.
Spike's channel. So, Ozzy joined in last year, and I think GK, you've done this 3 times now?
You and I did one for
2018, because we have the thought for that.
2017, because 2017 was when we bet on the game that we would stream.
Okay.
I think. I feel like we'd spend.
How bad is
this
the first
is the fourth one?
I think we did okay on the first one. Like, it was... No one was ever going to predict that they would take stuff like Lunar 2, and that was before we made a games list, so we just looked at the submissions after reviewing all of them offline and just kind of talked about everything.
Yeah, and speaking of which, you're probably going to immediately notice a different format this year, which is, we'll get a little bit more into, but suffice it to say, for one, yes, we are dumb.
Yeah. I was trying to think if we should do that, if there's another slide of this or not. It's been a while since I've seen this.
Yeah, so last year we covered all 300 and almost 340 offers.
And it
There's
took
a
us
lot of-
7 hours.
Yeah, it's a lengthy process.
Yeah, I'm jumping to this slide because I know this picture's on this slide. This was from 2018.
Mm-hmm.
We went for 5 hours.
That was 20, yeah, and that was like there were 100 fewer submissions.
There were way more
Needless to-
fewer.
Needless to say, we're changing it up a little bit this year. We're doing something a lot closer to what Ghoul and I usually do for, or have done recently for the GDQ prediction show on Spike Vegeta's channel. And the main reason for this is to cut down on time. So we're really only going to be focusing on games that we have either on our accept list or stuff that we very nearly picked. So there's stuff that's like we're going to have left off. Typically, we've covered every single submission. Sometimes we just cover it in like a single sentence. Sometimes, we would go in depth on something, like our particular thoughts about it, but I don't really want to do that for every single game this year.
Yeah, so it'll be a little bit different. It should go by a little bit faster. The downside is we don't get to talk about everything. So
Apologies if we don't mention a game you particularly would like to have seen or would like to us to have mentioned or talked about. We just don't want to put that kind of time out there.
All right. So, I guess real quick before we go too much further, there is a disclaimer on the top of the screen that I will now read aloud because even though it's going to stay on the stream the entire time, I want to make sure that I can rub this in. We are not on the games committee. We have no knowledge of the committee or their thought process. Anything said here is pure speculation. And if we say something you think is stupid, and because it's something only an idiot would say, it's because we're idiots. The games list is supposed to be out on the 16th, unless it's postponed. But yeah, we don't know anything more about this than anyone else does.
Yeah, we have basically what is the history of what they do. We have looked at all the runs, or at least have enough knowledge of the run to be able to make an educated guess. The only thing we really know is 3 of the games committee members, those being Wexel, Elmagus, and Dragondark.
Yeah. We have, like I said, we don't have any extra knowledge. The only thing we have is looking at past data and past runs and past lists and try to apply what we see from those to the current games list we see. And even then, it's hard as hell.
Yeah, there's no guarantee that any of us are going to get more than 50% right. It's a high likelihood. We pride ourselves that we make these educated guesses, and we've done well in the past.
I think we got like 60% of the hours or so last year, I would say. And
Aussie won with like 53% of the hours, but do remember we kind of have a particular scoring system where it's like, okay, if they took the correct game. Actually, I think Aussie had correct hours, but like 53% total games, like got the right game, wrong category, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So like our like individual scoring system can be a bit weird. We're right a little more than half the time. I think between the 3 of us, there were maybe 20% of games that are the games that like just weren't on any of our lists.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're still gonna even though there's 3 of us making individual games lists, they're gonna take stuff that we don't actually have on ours at all.
Mm-hmm. Some of it, I think, stems a little bit from us being a little bit different. I think the average age of the games committee for Limit Break's a little bit older, so some of them are more familiar with older games. But I do believe that they try to be very fair, and they've continually improved in that over the years. I thought last year's games list was actually probably the best one they've done since 2016.
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's a lot that goes into this, and the other thing that's very different is it's a lot easier to avoid, like, to kind of get over your own personal bias if you have 4 other people on the committee yelling at you to stop being an idiot. We don't have that as much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, there's a little bit of that, and, like, there's a lot of points where we all took the same game because of that, but there's points where it's just like, I'm not taking that game on my list, you know, and...
I probably have taken one game that you guys all did because it was stupidly easy, but I'm so firm in my belief that it's not getting in. I'm just not going to cave into pressure from you two.
We have our moments.
All right. I think that covers the disclaimer. So, so yeah, there were a lot of submissions. So again, to kind of go over how we do ours and what we do, when the games list was, or when the offers were all in, you know, I forget what the exact day was. I think it was like, you know, a week and a half ago almost.
It was like the 26th.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we all went in, and we've had like probably 4 different calls. GK and I have done a lot more than that, just kind of chatting about random shit, but...
To be fair, yeah, we'll get into like a call, and I'm like, hey, you want to play a game of something, and then we'll play a game, and then while we're playing the game, it's like, oh, this got offered. Oh, nice.
Yeah, so, but in general, we'll do, you know, multiple very, very long calls where we're looking at games, we're watching runs, and we try to kind of piece together, like, we look at every single game at least a little bit. My general go-to, if I'm watching like an RPG that I don't know very well, it's the big 3. You find a cutscene, you watch what cutscenes look like, you watch movement and try to see what overworld movement looks like, and you find a battle. And usually from those, it kind of like, you get a little bit of a piece of a run without actually seeing, like, watching the whole thing. It's not perfect, it's not scientific, it's just, that tends to be like the bare minimum of what we do for every game. There's games we do more. If we already know a game ahead of time, like, we don't need to watch... I don't have to watch GK's E's run at all. I know what they look like, for example.
Yeah, it looks like shit.
I'm gonna kick you, Ozzy.
But there pretty much is no game in this list like that was offered that we didn't look at some point in some form.
Totally. I tend to try and look for boss battles, look for any sort of movement tricks. We'd like to look over people's pitches as well, because those do actually give good indicator. I will say, while the pitch is not the most defining aspect of your submission, I definitely think the pitch is very, very... its value is underrated when it comes to marathons.
Yeah, especially for an RPG marathon. There's a lot, like, reading pitches that kind of just... It's not the only thing that matters, especially, like, you know, there's foreign language offers. You know, I know that Legrand said, like, it's hard for him sometimes to write pitches because his first language is French. But at the same time, it does, like, you know, your first impression should be a good one, hopefully. But that said, the Limit Break Committee probably does a lot more than what we did. So they've seen games, they've got a lot more to discuss, they've got a lot of other ideas and goals they want to accomplish. So,
and obviously, as opposed to us, they have a more personal stake in it.
Yes. It is their actual job. We just do this for fun. Something I do want to talk about before we get into any games themselves is, you know, for GDQs, we kind of have our own little easily defined segments. You know, they're going to take 5 Zelda games, and they're going to take 1 long RPG, and they're going to take, you know, 2 or 3 2D Marios, and, you know, 2 Sonics, and so on and so forth. I went through with GK a little bit and just tried to, like, piece together, like, a similar-ish look at, like, past Limit Breaks, because in the past we just went page by page and we'd go like a certain amount, like, okay, that's a decent spot to split or something like that. We'd go page by page, but it doesn't work that well for presenting it. And then it also, like, it's a good litmus test to see if our own lists kind of match up against what historically had been done. So if you look, we've got our splits over here, and these are kind of the categories that we went into. And in general, you can kind of see some patterns. They have kind of trended in different ways over the years. There's some things they do now that they didn't do back at the first two events. There's things in the first two events that don't happen as much nowadays. There's different genres that they kind of don't have access to very often that they want, or like different games like that. It's a very interesting thing to look at in that regard. But like usually we counted it up. Every year there's like 7 to 9 Final Fantasy / Chrono Trigger on the list. There's always at least 2 Kingdom Hearts games, or at least one pretty long one. Lots of things like that. So we tried to break it down by that, and even kind of ran a little bit of our own list through that to see how well they kind of matched up.
Yeah, some of what we have on here is, what do they conventionally take? And some of these is just we kind of categorize things, not necessarily by something that we think they'd be looking for per se, but it makes an easy way to group them together. Like Sega stuff here, I feel like they do try and take something from Sega consoles, but it doesn't necessarily feel like they have to reach for them.
Yeah. And again, this isn't like what we want to see necessarily. It's just kind of what we think will happen based on what they've done in the past. So kind of having an idea of what they've done previously kind of helps us kind of break down and see that. So again, it's not like the biggest thing, but it's something that's kind of interesting to note, because Limit Break, being a specialized marathon, has to kind of break their stuff down even more compartmentally. That said, our categories are kind of all going to be somewhat arbitrary. There's some stuff that you're going to be like, why isn't this in this category? And it's like, it's because the game's in another category. Don't worry about it, if it's there. And like, you got to put it somewhere, and some games fall under like 2 or 3 different things. And we just kind of put it in the spot that we think it kind of fits from like a schedule making perspective. If you were like using it and trying to like fill arbitrary ratios where it goes, and kind of the audience it appeals to, I guess, is the better way of putting it. Right?
Yeah.
Also, some things we did, because having only 2 entries on a slide doesn't look as good as having like 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's also true. There are some things that, like, as a really good example, they almost always take one Disgaea or one Disgaea adjacent game, right?
They've taken a Disgaea 4 years, and they took Phantom Brave, which is Disgaea in all but name and slightly different mechanics.
Yeah. So, like, for example, having a Disgaea slide and then say, congratulations, you're the Disgaea game we think is going to happen this year, doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it's kind of like an arbitrary category that would work on its own, it's kind of doesn't work for the purposes of the slideshow. So Disgaea, for example, just falls under PlayStation. Right?
Strategy, actually. In this
case.
Case.
Strategy? Oh, that's right.
Yeah. It could be in both.
It could be under PlayStation.
Is the thing.
Yeah,
that's my proving my point for me. Let's go.
Multi-console. Yeah, I think we made our point, guys. Are we ready to get split? I can't wait until somebody calls about anything Sega related.
Oh, one of these years we'll invite Shentok on the show to just rant for the Sega slide. We're just not even gonna have like any games predicted for it. He's just gonna say like a minute of stuff, and then we're gonna move on.
Right.
All right. So with that out of the way, I think we should kind of get into our own lists, right?
Yep.
So first things first, we got Final Fantasy. And
Always a classic.
oh dear God, why?
Cool. Why did you put this in here? Cool.
We had a little bit too much fun with the slideshow.
You had too much fun with the slideshow.
I'm not the only one that had some fun with it. GK did plenty.
Yeah, so to kind of also categorize what we've done, on the left column we'll show who took what on their lists. We color coordinated it a little bit. So if you see all 3 of us, it means we're all in agreement. If you see one of us, it means one of us is a contrarian and the other 2 might be wrong, unless it's Ghoul, in which case Ghoul is wrong.
In which case Ghoul is wrong. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically we took all of our lists, we kind of condensed them down. Like, and put them all on here so you can see if a game is on this, we predicted it basically.
Mm-hmm.
So
All right,
I guess
let's-
going from the top, Final Fantasy
I kind of
3.
want to. Okay. Oh, actually, I kind of want to wait on that one a little bit because it's kind of a very short novel thing. First, I think the elephant in the room with the submissions was Final Fantasies 4 through 7, and to start with 4 through 6, a big relay race was offered. Now, the Final Fantasy relay is kind of something that goes back a long time in just speedrunning in general. This is something that they've done since like 2012, 2013.
Yeah, I believe that before there was even a Western one, Japan used to always have a big one on Nico.
Mm-hmm. So we all actually individually took each game, and I think our kind of mindset is usually these big kind of community pitches. They tend to take these a lot. We actually are a little on the fence about the relay itself, though. Of these games, I think we were all in agreement that Final Fantasy V is probably the most likely. They didn't take it last year, and Vic has been like working the heck out of this game, so that one I think is in probably.
It's
regardless
also
of
kind of
relay.
the most awkward one to get. Like, they pretty regularly have a good 4 and 6 offer. They don't always necessarily have an amazing, like, offer for 5. So the fact there's a good offer for 5 this year means it just feels pretty good to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we're all unanimously in agreement about if they do the relay, it's an entire day of just classic SNES Final Fantasy.
Yeah. There's a lot of issues with it for me personally. Like, the reason I predicted it is, again, if you have 6 people offering something, they've never turned it down. It just happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's some of the most popular Final Fantasy that's ever been in the marathon, which is also a big reason why you would consider.
But there are downsides to doing it as a relay like this. If it's meant to be like a race, incentives get really awkward, and so you're kind of burning 3 very big games for like naming incentives and things you can do mid-run, and you can't really do those in a race. You can't really act out the opera scene in like Final Fantasy VI, for example. Like it doesn't work very well. So you're burning like 12 hours of a day to do this big relay. There's a bit of a risk of someone falls way behind and the race doesn't matter by the time Final Fantasy VI starts, and you're losing the ability to do incentives. So you're getting this weird callback to something that started on the channel. You know, like one of the first events on the Limit Break channel was the first Western Final Fantasy relay. But it's not a free take by any means. It is not necessarily I don't think it's the best way to use all 3 of the games, but I think it'll happen ultimately.
Yeah. The nice thing is we took all of them separately, so it's like if they only take a couple of these, we're right about like 2 of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is something you slap on like Friday at like 8:30 in the morning, and it's gonna run until like the evening. There are flaws to it. There's also the significant upside because all of these games are among the biggest on the channel, and this could raise like bank.
Yeah.
If this gets in, this is the thing that you slap on like all of your promotion. This is the thing that's like people are gonna look at and be like, I gotta see this.
Yeah, it's just weird. Like I said, there's a lot of there's downsides to it. I like the idea of calling it back. They kind of can struggle to get races in sometimes and have them feel natural, and I mean the runners are like good enough to make that work. It's just specifically that I think it ruins incentives for some of these games, and these are games that are valuable with their incentives, and I think significantly less valuable without them. So, other than that, so those are our big ones. Another really big one, obviously, is 7. All 3 of us have that.
So 7 is a peculiar case because they have had this one offered quite a few times, and I feel like they've tiptoed around no slots for probably the entire existence of the marathon. I don't know if it was offered in the first 2, but starting in 2017, 7 was continually offered, and they would say in 2017 they had the 4-person relay for 9, so that kind of edged it out. In 2018 they had the top 2 for FF8 offer, and that ended up pushing it out. Last year they had the 10-person relay, so they ended up pushing that in, and it kind of felt like this has been a run that they've it's been stacked against something else, and that something else has usually had some additional like X factor that's pushed 7 no slots out. They did do a PC no debug room in 2017, but they've kind of shied away from doing like the big PS1 category that everyone knows this game for. And this, to me, like, this is the time to take this. You have the remake coming out, the hype is higher than it's ever been. The category's changed a little bit as far as new tricks. They have a big new, like, 20-minute sequence break since the last major showing of this game in 2017 at SGDQ. And you have world record holder Zeal, who's one of the few people who can actually say he can go toe-to-toe with Lizbel in a PS1 Final Fantasy. And Dave Stereo is also offered as part of this, and he was kind of one of the big names that came out from SCDQ 2017 when he was on the couch for this run, and like his stream like grew significantly off of that run. He is a name that like you absolutely would benefit from having. Like, to me, this is just like, this is the time you finally break the glass on this game.
Yeah,
the planets and stars have aligned.
I didn't even think the
Yes.
stars have aligned. It feels like a game that you always kind of know they're going to want to do at some point, and this is kind of the category. Like, it's the biggest Japanese RPG of all time, basically, right? I don't think that's like too much of an exaggeration. It's going to happen on the channel eventually, and this is kind of the category for Final Fantasy VII lovers in a way. It was just a matter of kind of when, and they finally burned everything else to the point where it's like, do this and you have the runners to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And leapfrogging off of that, we have an offer of an interesting game here, which is Dirge's Cerberus FF7. Now, they like their Final Fantasy spin-offs. They took, and they're okay to even go to like some of the weirder ones, like they took Type 0 last year. Dirge is one of those games that I think, like, it rides a little bit on the FF7 hype as well, but it's a game that a lot of people played. A lot of people have memories of. They're not necessarily good ones, per se. This is not exactly a beloved video game. The runners seem fairly passionate about his offer for this. I think this would be a good spin-off to take. For one, it also features Vincent, who's not in the FF7 run anywhere, I don't think.
probably not. He's, yeah, and like GK said, they always tend to take, you know, like one weird-ish spin-off that maybe doesn't even necessarily have, like, super positive memories. Like, you know, Type 0 is a good example of a similar type of game. They did Crystal Chronicles, for example, at the first one. Granted, that came off of a backup. You have stuff like World of Final Fantasy by Seraph in, was it 2017?
Yeah.
So they always tend to kind of do one of these. I think it's the one that can do. They can slot this kind of around the silly or their awful block if they want to. If not, it kind of stands on its own. It's an easy enough watch to follow. Like I haven't played this game, and I can still watch the run. Like, it's not bad.
And I honestly think, back on to what Ghost was saying earlier about it, because it's tied to Final Fantasy VII and there's the Final Fantasy VII hype, there is that enough of an intrigue for people that have never experienced this game for themselves to want to tune in and watch, just to see what the game is like.
There's also a lot of just intrigue from people who did play it who'd be interested in seeing, you know, I remember this game. I didn't care for it. What's the run of this like?
What's the run?
And
What's
then-
the, like, you know, I just played the remake. What was the story of that weird spin-off game on the PS2 again? There's a lot of reasons to kind of look at this.
And one of the nice things about speedruns is sometimes you get a run that, like, kind of masks some of the flaws of the game itself.
Yeah,
So-
I feel like we've all seen like a game where the game itself looks impressive, but that's only because the runner makes it look impressive.
Yeah. And then I guess going on other stuff that we only had one other like slight agreement. Me and GK both think Final Fantasy 3. It's kind of it's a really short arbitrary execution run, but it's also like the only Final Fantasy they've never had on the channel in any way, or in the
Pretty
marathon
much.
in any way.
It's the only non-MMO Final Fantasy main series game that they've never had, and they've just never had an offer for it. So it's just kind of just a way to complete the whole thing. Now, admittedly, it's not like the no ACE or the full categories of this game. The full categories for this game tend to be really marathon unsafe. So I feel like they'd still have to do a glitch category. But, you know, this is the last one that they have not taken, and I feel like it would just be an interesting little thing to kind of close, you know, close that whole thing off and just say, you know, we've done every single Final Fantasy at this point.
And that's where I disagree, and why I didn't end up throwing my hat into this, because I ultimately thought about it, and I was trying to like see where the value of that decision comes from, and I see zero benefit to having such a thing done just for the sake of having Final Fantasy 3 in, when it's not that impressive. It's 10 minutes. Is it even worth the time for what it is?
I still think
I think it's totally fine. I also think you could have like a running incentive. Let's get over, $25,000 raised during our relay race, and we'll throw a bonus run of Final Fantasy 3 on at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but nobody will get excited about Final Fantasy 3.
They don't have to get excited. I mean, you can tack it on as an incentive to something else, and it feels like a good thing to try to reach for.
And then, honestly, it's a decent enough like little showcase. It's one of those novel Final Fantasy runs that you could put in.
Yeah, but it's not even like a cool party trick run.
It's a decent party trick run.
It's a decent, it's totally fine. That's my thought process on it. Like I said, since they're kind of, to me, they're hurting for incentives in the relay itself. I think this helps patch that a little bit if they use it as a bonus run or something like that.
I just think it'd be an interesting thing to feature. Like, you show all the, either glitchless or the like no major glitches things in the marathon for most of these games, and then you just have this one category that's just like, we're gonna smack the crap out of this game.
Yeah.
I that's just it. I don't think they're gonna even give it the effort. That's all.
Yeah.
The other thing too is like, admittedly games like this are really harmless on your schedule. It's like, if this run doesn't go over well, then they lose 10 minutes of their time. We're not picking games on here that we're just like, oh, we have 2 extra minutes, like let's throw in, or not 2, like 10 extra minutes, let's just throw in a 10-minute run because we have the minutes. No, we do believe that this game actually has a legitimate shot of being at the marathon.
Yeah. And then I guess to go on the one-ofs, GK, you had a game that I ran on your list. Why don't you talk about it a bit and why?
Again, they like doing their spin-offs. Crystal Chronicles does have nostalgia. I know you ran this and you have like a lot of far
I am more
negative
negative on
things.
this game than anyone I have ever met, and it's funny because people have this really weird nostalgia for this game. And I think the moment they replay it in any form, that nostalgia will immediately evaporate. Because I was the same way when I was learning the speedrun. I'm like, oh man, I loved this game as a kid. And then like I played it, and then I realized there's nothing to this game.
At the same time, it just looked like an interesting offer. They haven't had it since the first
Yeah,
event.
I mean, there's upsides. Like my run didn't finish because of a lovely little disk read error in the middle of the final boss. But at the same time, I don't know. I feel like there's more value elsewhere, and I don't think that, like, the remake's not going to be out until, I think, like, they're saying August or September at this point. And I think even after the remake, I'm not even sure this game becomes a slam dunk for me, but I don't know. I just have a feeling on this one. I will be front row on the couch for this, I'm sure, if it gets in. I hope I'm front row on the couch. But
it's up to the runner.
It's up to the runner. Like, I'm not like trying to like push my way on, but like I probably will be this like one of the most knowledgeable people at the event on the game. But I don't really have a great feeling about it. They've already done it once. They don't tend to repeat Final Fantasy spin-offs that much. I don't know.
Except Tactics.
I mean, Tactics might as well be Final Fantasy 7.5. Let's be honest.
Yeah, people say I say Chrono Trigger is Final Fantasy 6.5, and people tell me no.
Yeah,
part of the reason why I didn't weigh Crystal Chronicles that much is because I was looking at other action RPGs that fill the similar niche, because that's what Crystal Chronicles is ultimately.
Yeah, and then I guess there's one last little one of I took Final Fantasy 13 the race. I will straight up admit I do not like the pitch for this. I don't.
Our biggest issue, so the thing with this is it's a race between Mutsuki and Ludolphin, who are both very good at this game. Like, this is no disrespect to their skill at the game. And a race for this game would not be bad. It would be the most modern like Final Fantasy that they have here, because the next quote unquote modern is Dirge, and that's a little bit of a different ball game. The thing with this one is Roosta. Okay, I'm sorry, but I think I think Mutski actually told me about the plans for this offer, so that might have been what I mixed up. But anyways, the thing with this offer is they say that the person in the lead is looking to do like when one person gets a lead, they'd be looking to run the older strats, whereas the person who's behind would run newer strats. I don't like the idea of a run in which a runner seems to be openly handicapping themselves. Because one of like I would assume if they're newer strats, they're probably faster overall. It also has the problem of making things harder to follow if your routes are significantly different.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things that sounds like a good idea on paper, and I think it sounds like a nightmare to actually watch. On top of just kind of being, well, why do a race at that point to me? Like, at that point, do a solo run, and then if an old strat is like a really cool strat, then you do that instead of the newer one. Like, that's like an okay way to like show, hey, this game has. When did 13 come out? 20. I guess I was still in high school, right? So it'd be like 2010. This game has 10 years of speedrunning history, and a lot has changed over those years. I think that's a great idea. I just don't like the idea of doing it as a race because races are inherently competitive, and like you kind of lose the value of making it a race while also making the race hard to follow, and the commentary is really difficult. I don't know. It's to me, it's in because it's been a long time since this run has been in, and they have reached very hard for Final Fantasy 13 in the past to me. So to me, I think it's probably time for this to repeat. It hasn't been in since the second marathon. They did 13-2 and Lightning Returns, and then the series took a year off. So if you go by like normal rotation theory, it's rotated through again. So.
And then we do have one last thing on here, which is our randomizer.
Oh yeah, that's there too.
Is this the randomizer we're looking
for the most? What are you talking about?
I just kind of mentally saw like a bunch of them listed in a row with all three of us and totally missed the randomizer.
All right, you get your 2 minutes of just man crushing on Guy.
Geyer is awesome. I do not like Final Fantasy speedruns. I can watch Geyer play that game all day.
Yeah, so we ultimately felt like that. So this run had the free enterprise pitch of last year. It's there's like 4 people offering and 3 backups, so there's going to be people there, and there's going to be people who are going to do commentary. Final Fantasy 1 randomizer. It's this game has a lot of decent things that make a randomizer work for it. It does your kind of 2-hour randomizer run. I do personally hope that like they can build off of some of the stuff, because Free Enterprise was a big success last year, despite one of the runners finishing massively behind the others. So, like, I do think that there's going to be looking to take 1 or 2 randomizers, and this one was probably the one that we were most convinced of, as far as, it being a good run.
To me, it's the most developed.
Yeah, it's a good run of itself. It has a good community presence here. My one reservation is this would make Final Fantasy 1 the single most accepted run of the marathon, like finally surpassing Earthbound, because it's been tied with Earthbound for a long time.
Yeah, and I don't think that's really a horrible nod, because this is about as classic gets. Earthbound is kind of like, it has always been that quirky, weird game. I don't mind Final Fantasy bearing that mantle of repeat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like it's a different version each time. At least it's like NES, then they'll do Game Boy, they'll do PSP, they'll do NES again. This will be randomizer, so
Yeah,
it's
they
kind
did
of like
that
it's the same
last
game,
year
but
as
there's
well,
so little in common between them in some ways. It's kind of like doing different games. You could almost call like Final Fantasy, like the GBA version, like Final Fantasy 1.5 in a way, like because they completely reworked how magic works and all kinds of different stuff with that.
Yeah, I have a small theory that the reason why they're doing Final Fantasy 1 so much is because they're still trying to get Warmech to appear. Just once. Just give me Warmech just once.
Yeah. It's also, this is anecdotal and it goes somewhere else, but specifically when we talked to Villagin at one point about GDQ games list, and we thought it was weird one year that they did Final Fantasy 1, and, it's like, yeah, it's a nostalgia game, and he goes, no, you don't understand. This game actually does incredibly well in marathons. Like, almost across the board, Final Fantasy 1 is one of the best performing runs minute per minute that you can put into a marathon. So, it's an interesting thing to look at. To me, it's like I said, it's just the most developed randomizer with the biggest community pitch. And I don't think you want too much of it.
and it was easily the one randomizer we all came together and almost unanimously agreed upon with little discussion.
Admittedly, I have a different reason to be biased towards it, but yes.
All right. I think that's all the Final Fantasy. We did not skip any, or we.
Yep, that is all of. Those are the takes we have for Final Fantasy.
KH.
Yep, Kingdom Hearts.
The other Final Fantasy now.
So Kingdom Hearts, in the past, they usually take 2 games or so. That's kind of just how it tends to go. Usually it's one big one and one spin-off.
Yeah,
They've had an issue in the past with it, though, where they had the Metroid problem, in a way, where they had 2 very, 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 very strong games that they could get every year, and nothing else. And they kind of finally got a 3rd one.
Yeah, there's there's 1 and 2, and then there's Birth by Sleep, which not quite as beloved, but the runs are short, and they've always had the category bid war. Just as a quick note, we actually copied these from a sheet, so Birth by Sleep final mix there, that's supposed to say 305. 185 there is number of minutes.
Because we go by minutes on our sheet to make it easier to add up. Because you can't add times for some reason. It tries to, roll over at the 24-hour mark.
Mm-hmm.
So
real quick clarification. I believe this is the only run where 2 of us accepted the game, but we accepted different categories. But basically, they don't have a large pool of games, and they had the really unfortunate circumstance of their games selection last year came just before Kingdom Hearts 3 came out. So there was no great way to get a Kingdom Hearts 3 run in last year when it was at its peak of popularity. So now that we've had a year to digest this game, honestly, I think they're really lucky that Remind, the DLC, has kind of rebuilt some of the initial hype for this game, because I know this game kind of fizzled out a little bit quicker than Kingdom Hearts games tend to. So there's definitely going to be a draw to having a Kingdom Hearts 3 run at a limit break. Gives them a different game. The run itself, well, I know the community is a little bit more polarized on this one than they are for 1 and 2. There's still some really good parts about the run. This is the best-selling Kingdom Hearts game.
The movement is really, really nice. There's a lot of interesting boss strats. It's not you don't quite have the nostalgia value that you get in 1, and you don't have I always compare 1 to being Street Fighter, and then 2 is the Guilty Gear of the series as far as this really complicated, high-octane, crazy combo game. 3 is kind of it tries to hybrid some of those, and it's not always successful, but I think it's more than successful enough to have them basically frothing at the mouth to get just new Kingdom Hearts in.
It's also, I believe the new updates have actually tweaked this game, so whether that makes it a better run remains to be seen, but I noticed a lot of the community who's a little bit more iffy on this game is more positive about it right now. And the other thing I do want to touch on is the person offering is Swift Shadow. Swift Shadow has been the best runner of this game for a substantial amount of time, and he sadly was not part of the relay they did at GDQ, despite I think he offered with some other group, and they ended up taking, there was 2 group offers, and they ended up taking the other one. So I think it'd be also kind of just cool on a personal note to give him a showing of this game. He's put in a lot of work too, so I think this one was probably one of the quickest accepts of any game on this list.
Yeah, there's really nothing that should stop them from taking this game. It's not even that long compared to the other big name offers as well. So it's just so take it, just freaking.
I mean, they got the best offer of just the closest thing to a standard category for this game that they probably are gonna get. It would be cool to have some sort of new DLC showcase, and I imagine that's probably going to be
that'll be in the cards. I'm sure.
Soon.
I'm sure they'll find some way to say, hey, I know we didn't have it initially as an incentive, but can we show off a secret boss or whatever else? Show off. They may even do a full data org thing if that actually becomes a thing. I don't know. I'm sure it'll work out in some way.
Mm. And now on to RPG Ventus.
Yeah. So Birth by Sleep Final Mix. Admittedly, I had this as all stories on my initial list until I just needed the extra 2 hours. Like, it was that close to being that for me. I guess even an hour and a half, because I got really tight on space towards the end. I don't know how much value doing another bidding war really adds, given they've done this has it even been 3 times now they've done it?
Twice. They've only done this game twice.
Yeah.
I'm in the boat that I think they'll take all stories, because while the bid war has generally fared really well and been one of the biggest donation incentives of a given limit break, they've shown that they're willing to take a full, like, all stories kind of category, like what they did with Legend of Mana. And it'd just be a different way to do this game and kind of, have the full thing and have, like, some of the, stuff that doesn't get shown in the individual stories runs. I think they could do either. I felt a little bit higher about them taking the all stories run this time, especially because they have 2 people offering it, and they're both really good at the game.
Yeah, it's, like I said, it was neck and neck to me the entire time. I just wanted the extra hour and a half for other games. And it was one of the easier games to cut, because I don't think, you lose a little bit, I think, when you don't do all stories, but it still is really cool to see one character done quickly, and they also have, like, the world's easiest bidding war. Or, like, donation.
Also, shoutouts to the biggest word salad title of this entire game.
I'm not even sure that's true.
HD.
No, because like point 2 is like Kingdom Hearts 0.2 Birth by Sleep Final Chapter Prologue or something like that.
Shut up, bullshit! You're hurting my brain.
I think that's the official title for that one. It's
why? The reason why I didn't vote for anything Birth by Sleep is because I felt that that Kingdom Hearts 3 was easy enough. I thought maybe I don't know how Remind was going to turn out, how much additional time they were going to add, because I'm pretty sure they're going to try and work Remind in some way for a incentive, especially since I hear that it was like really, really good. And if there's one thing that is shown in the past that does extraordinarily good, it's hard boss fights incentive for Kingdom Hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. And there was so many great games. What can I say?
Yeah. So yeah, that's what we had for Kingdom Hearts. Just moving on. We have our Pokemans.
Pokemon is interesting. So back in the day, from like 2012 to like 2016, one of the things that had been kind of problematic is Pokemon, while it being really popular, had historically not done amazing in marathons. It wasn't raising as much money as people thought, and it wasn't performing as well by other metrics. But that's kind of started to change ever since 2017. The second most viewed speedrun, like non-task spot speedrun on the GDQ YouTube channel is Pokemon Emerald. The most viewed by a country mile on the Limit Break YouTube channel is Pokemon Crystal. And the donation, like, Pokemon set a record at SGDQ last year for most money raised on a non-weekend day at a GDQ. So, like, it's slowly shifted for GDQ, and I think it's also shifted for Limit Break to the point where they
completely shifted for Limit Break
really
as well.
They really want to take these games. Let's Go, while it was a little bit slow to pick up, ended up raising a lot of money this past Limit Break, so it does have a lot of value for them.
Yeah, but we're not here to talk about Let's Go. We are, of course, going to be talking about the big elephant in the room, Sword and Shield.
Yeah, Sword and Shield is, in my opinion, one of the most likely runs of the entire marathon.
It is the fastest selling Pokemon game and might be one of the best by the time the marathon happens. This game is sold like hotcakes. I know its reception is a little bit more polarized, but there's no denying this is the hot new Pokemon game, and even the haters tend to flock to these runs and see, oh, what's a run of this game look like? We did address that in the FF13 run, that the categories, like, one would seemingly be doing a slower strat. This one, they're offering a Sword and Shield race between separate games. It's not a bid war. It's there's Kizaron, who's kind of needs no introduction at this point, and another runner by the name of Etchy. and they both run separate games, and they're going to do one would do sword, one would do shield. The only real difference, I think, between the runs, apart from a few of the opponent's trainer Pokemon, is the shield route uses Arcanine and then later Excadrill, while the sword run just uses Sobble. And rather than one version being a handicap, they don't really know which version is ultimately the fastest right now. They're both very close. So, like, they're both just going to be running as fast as they can, and it really could be either racer's race.
Mm-hmm.
So,
to me, it's just the combination of these have been the most successful runs on the YouTube channel. They do pretty well on donations even at the event. Kizaron is an incredibly entertaining individual.
And an incredibly valuable individual. And
this is one of the most valuable games you could take as far as just getting something new on the schedule. It's pretty much a no-brainer. And then is one that GK has some choice words on, I'm sure.
Out of all the games offered to last year's Limit Break that did not get in, this is the only one that I think was an outright snub. Now, Mystery Dungeon's a little weird because the way this game plays is a little bit basic. It's kind of, you either like it or you don't really see the deal with that. And I get that. It's a run that also has a fairly decent share of cutscenes, so maybe they didn't look at it with how much potential value that this run might have. They can't. I think if they don't take this game this year, it's an outright mistake. When they announce a remake of a game, which usually stirs up interest, that's already a high point. This is one of their most viewed VODs on their YouTube channel.
When this was on at RPG Blitz specifically.
Yeah. So online marathon runs on the Limit Break channel, the VODs tend to do weaker than the in-person event runs.
Let me real quick. I'm gonna just go ahead and just, since it's literally just capturing my entire monitor, I'm just gonna show this because it's really easy to just show this. So we go to Limit Break. We're gonna get sort by most popular. I'll put this over here so you guys can all see it. And so you see right here, like, the Crystal Glitchless run is the most viewed, almost at 1 million views. And then you scroll, and the very first main event run is Let's Go by Oro.
And that run was like 2 months after Let's Go came out.
Yeah, so like it had a good amount of hype. And then you keep going, and then you have Blue Rescue Team just below it. Like,
This run has performed very well by all metrics. Like, the view count's very high, the feedback on the run is very positive, very high like to dislike ratio. Like, if you're using any sort of YouTube metrics, this run has performed extremely well. Another thing to look at, and I hope they look at their analytics on their YouTube channel, this run I am almost 100% sure was the most looked at run on the YouTube Limit Break channel for Limit Break, and I don't think it was close. Like, this had about 110,000 views at the start of January, and ended off at about 135.
Yeah, it's kind of bonkers. Like I said, I wouldn't ever associate Mystery Dungeon being around, like, a Chrono Cross level, like, another Kingdom Hearts run, which, again, for a long time, the most viewed run was the Kingdom Hearts 2 run by Biz. It's up there as far as one of the most viewed runs on the channel, and it's a 2-hour run. Like, it's not that hard to do.
It's Pokemon. Like I said, you got a new remake coming out for this game. The hype for this game is surprisingly high. Like, I think this is the best time to do this. I think it's already proven itself by every conceivable metric other than donations. And I think it will do well on donations regardless. There's, like, the fan base for the Mystery Dungeon games is die-hard. Like, the first 2 games specifically. Like, these fans love these games, sometimes beyond the way that, a lot of Pokemon fans love the main series.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people that play Pokemon games and they have their fair share of criticisms. But when they with Mystery Dungeon, it's either they love it or hate it. And when I say love it, I mean, like, they're in love with this game. When somebody else brings it up in conversation, they just suddenly come to life. Like, oh my god, you play Mystery Dungeon as well? Oh my god.
And admittedly, a little bit of that has to do with the story of the game and not as much the gameplay, but the run itself's got a lot of high points. And, one of the things Limerick has really done well is allowing people to have a sort of chance to relive nostalgia while also being able to watch like the entire playthrough of a run in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. So the game's got passion, and I think the runner for the game is really good at showcasing that as well, which is exactly what you want for this game.
Mm-hmm. It's no guarantee, because I thought for sure they would take it last year, but I definitely am very high on this year.
It's one of the few games that like, I'm with GK. I think it was one of their few quote-unquote mistakes. And again, it's very hard to make a schedule. There's a lot going on. Saying a mistake is probably like it's too hard to say that.
I think it was snubbed.
Yeah.
I think it's a better term. It's like it was left off when I think it should have been on there somewhere.
But and like I said, again, the community does an absolutely incredible job with the list. Last year's list was probably one of their best ever. It's just the one thing that might have just maybe it slipped through the cracks. Maybe it was a very late cut. We don't know. We don't have any information. To us, it's got to be in this year. There's just no reason to not take it.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, we have the Pokemon Blue No Save Corruption.
Yeah, so this one's pretty simple. I mean, it's 17 minutes. The Velociraptor actually offered it as a potential incentive, so I know they just did the task bot showing at GDQ. This one I felt like was of the Pokemon runs the one they could easily, take it or leave it. But it's more Pokemon. It's short. It's kind of one of those novel categories. It's a human person demonstrating this rather than a machine, which is always interesting.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things where GK makes fun of me. I have a bad habit of looking at like whatever metrics I can to try to like gauge interest in a game. And Pokemon has done so well traditionally on their YouTube channel that I just tend to overinflate like almost regardless. I think 17 minutes of just an extra Pokemon game just kind of fills the schedule out in a really nice way that kind of gives them a lot of long-term value to me. So.
Mm-hmm. And Velociraptor is solid at it. It's not just, 120th place who learned the run as a 12-hour challenge just offering, so...
Yeah. So, it's not even a party trick in that case, yeah. So, I think it's got a good chance. So.
Yep.
And, going on to the next one, we have Square. So, this is kind of a bit of an arbitrary category because... I'm going to go ahead and just click on to the next slide. We probably would have put Chrono Trigger next to Final Fantasies, but Chrono Cross goes under Square. And Secret of Mana is with SNES. So categories are a little arbitrary. But
the influence of Square Enix in RPG Limit Break is undeniable. For one, Enix and Square were two separate companies for a long time, so you have a lot of games that were one or the other, and then kind of are now IPs of both. But... yeah, they have been making RPGs for a very long time. They've had their hand in a lot of really good RPGs. So their presence in this marathon, they will get a lion's share of the hours.
Yeah. On top of that, there's kind of a weird chicken and egg thing with Limit Break, where because they do so much Square Enix and so much of their early marathons with Square, their audience likes Square, which. If you want to cater to your audience and do well on donations, you hit your own audiences, what they want to see. And they tend to want to see a lot of Square because, again, a lot of the early marathons, there were 5 Final Fantasy runs at the first marathon. There were 7 at the next. And that's not including, again, the adjacent Square games, like your Secret of Manas, your Chrono Cross, your, literally everything on this list type of games, your Sagas, your... there's so many of these that do well and perform well that they take a good number of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not our fault that Square literally makes tons and tons of intellectual properties that isn't named Final Fantasy that are just as successful in some places. It's incredible, which why we have to structure it this way. That said, these are the ones we ended up taking.
Let's go with the ones that we all agree on first. Musashi.
Yeah.
So this is a good just run in general. Ozzy and I have had very fun things to say about this because we're going to be doing a marathon on the channel called RPG Blitz this year. We did it last year. It was a success. We're going to be doing it again this year. And Musashi is one of the only games that I believe we heavily considered redoing. We actually are going to be doing it, 2 years in a row. It's a good run. It's a great group of people who are running it, and I think the thing that tipped me into just like almost immediately putting this in was they took this run by Dusler in 2017. Dusler's time was like 20 minutes off of record. So that shows to me they really have wanted this game for a long time, and it just he ended up withdrawing, so the game was not in at the time. Professor Proto, who's offering it, he is really good at the game. Very passionate about running this game. Like, this is a 20-minute faster estimate than the last time. The community has optimized this game. They've implemented a lot of new tricks in this game since 2017. I just think this one's prime for a showing at Limit Break.
Yeah, they want it. It's a good run. It's only gotten better over time now, and there's just no reason why they should not take it this year.
It also it's an unspoken thing that tends to happen. If a game gets in 1 year and then gets removed because a runner can't make it or something like that, they tend to put it in at the next available chance they can do that. It's it's a different runner, so it's not quite the what we call the good faith runs, where it's like, hey, you had a personal issue and couldn't make it this year, that's fine. You can make it this year, we'll put it in again. They tend to do that. That doesn't quite fall under that, but usually the best indicator that a game is going to get into the future is that it got in the past, even if especially if it wasn't run there, so it doesn't kind of go back on the clock to be out for a while. So
this game is just pure 90s nostalgia. I have never played this game, and I love watching runs of it.
Yeah.
I played the demo of this game over and over, and all I remember about the game was literally everything was new differently. Speaking of delicious food, Dragon Quest XI, the other game we're pretty unanimously agree that's gonna get it.
This and FF7 and Pokemon Sword are among the close. Limit Break has no locks. Let's just put that out there. But if we had to pick any games that we think are as close to a lock as possible, this is up there. You have Ellie, Andy, and High Spirits, who have all really good track records at this marathon, all really good at the game, all really well associated with Dragon Quest. On the latest Dragon Quest game, which they always want to put a Dragon Quest in.
Usually it's about this amount of Dragon Quest. Sometimes they'll do 2 games, sometimes they'll do just 1. It's kind of a weird series in the West. I think 11 actually did help it expand quite a bit.
Yeah.
There was a bit of weirdness with 9. We never got 10. It's kind of been a series that's in limbo while also being the Japanese game. It's a very interesting series to kind of go over for that and what its value would be to a marathon. I don't think that matters too much here. 6 hours and 30 minutes of a game that sold very well on Switch with, again, 3 great runners. It's pretty likely. Again, 6 hours and 30 minutes, you can't say anything that long is a lock, but it's pretty damn close.
Yeah, this is the best Dragon Quest has been in the West in a very long time as well. This game, I think, actually surpassed the 1 million units sold across all of its various platforms.
It probably did that in Japan alone, to be honest.
It did that. Oh no, it was 4 or 5 million in Japan, but it's
I don't even want to know what the 3DS numbers for this game were in Japan. They must have been off the charts.
Yeah, when Dragon Quest does well in the West, that's a good sign. And this version has given this game a lot of quality of life improvements since the PS4 and PC version, for speedrunning specifically. New modes, faster gameplay, and cutscene skip.
Yeah, the cutscene skip is
that alone.
Because I believe there's even a glitch that only works on the PC version, and that run is still 5 hours, or not. I think it's a 10-hour run. I want to say maybe it's down to 8, where you can go out of bounds and do all kinds of stuff, and that doesn't work on Switch. I'm pretty sure because it was a thing with mouse cursor movement, where the mouse cursor could move the camera in a way that would allow you to clip through walls. I don't know the details on it, but I'm pretty sure that because of that, it wouldn't work on Switch. And the run is still significantly faster. 9 hours for PC. There we go.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. The game is super relevant still, despite being almost 2 years old now.
Getting a character in Smash helps.
Yeah, that too. 2018. 2018 in the West, and then this version in 2019. So this game still is pretty recent. Like, and we know they like their recent games. They like to do their their prize of, we'll have a Switch and we'll have like some of the games in the marathon. They've done that twice now, and I think this would be an easy one for them to take for that.
So moving on, we have Final Fantasy Legend 2, Saga 2. You'll notice it technically has the Final Fantasy name and wasn't under the Final Fantasies. Again, kind of arbitrary category sometimes.
Thanks, localizers.
Yeah. Turns out it's easier to sell games when you put a big license on them, shockingly. But they tend to do, 1, 2, maybe 3 Sagas. Depends how long they tend to be.
Just not a ton of race offers, and you have 2 really good runners offer for this one, so I think this one stands a very good chance.
Yeah, it's again, 2 hours. Hard to complain too much on it. I don't think there's too much more to say on it, to be honest.
Yeah, I also think Invenerable and Random Hughes are 2 people who have been very closely associated with the marathon for a very long time, and then among the few people who that had kind of a presence there without actually having run a game in at the marathon. So I definitely think that this would be a good shot for them as well.
Yep.
And then Parasite Eve. They did this in 2016. I was on backup last year. Palmer is sunk a ton of work into this game.
Palmer is very, very good at this game. There's some weirdness to this, I think, at times where he can do this game blindfolded, but I think that's a terrible idea for a marathon outside of doing very small segments blindfolded, just because you probably can't have donations read and your commentary has to be very stilted during a blindfolded run. Doing that for an hour of Punch-Out, okay, that sounds great. But for a 4-hour RPG, not as good. But doing a segment or a chapter blindfolded would be a great incentive. You'd have 2 really good runners that can do a co-op type thing for this. There's just a lot you can do with this game. It's a very short commitment for a PS1 Square RPG as well. So
it fits a very different mold. This game being kind of like if Resident Evil was an RPG. It has a very different feel to it. It has a very different presentation, different audience to it. And PS1 nostalgia is pretty high when it comes to games like this.
Despite what many people consider ugly, this game has this level of charm from it, just from this era alone, that really helps it stand out. No other games look quite like they do from this era.
I think part of it
Eve is one of the better looking ones.
Yeah, I think part of that is, even though this is the era where a lot of people, myself included, really got into Japanese RPGs for the first time. And Parasite Eve was one of those games that people kind of got into because of that, which I think is part of the reason that this console has so much nostalgia for RPGs in particular.
Especially experimental RPGs, because Parasite Eve is anything but conventional.
Yeah, part of it I think was Final Fantasy VII completely opened the door for RPGs in the West, and there was a lot of RPGs that just kind of spewed out onto the platform. Some good, some not so good, but very nostalgia heavy for people.
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with moving on from here because we've more or less said everything we wanted to with this game.
Yeah, and that is all of the games that we were unanimous on, actually. A little bit more disagreements on the Square side of things. Again, there's so many different games and so many different ways to kind of, we kind of have, again, there's a kind of a feel for how you put the puzzle pieces together, but you can get a different puzzle piece. You can get the blue puzzle piece out of the box and put it on next to your red. It'll look really nice and pretty, or you can go get the yellow puzzle piece and put that next to it. There's not one way to build this schedule correctly. So each of us has kind of our own take on where they would go from here.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the ones that we did have at least a 2-person agreement. We had Saga Frontier 2 with GK and Ozzy. You guys want to talk about it a little bit?
So Saga Frontiers had a pretty routine presence at Limit Break. It was in 2 years in a row and then back up on another one. This one's a different game altogether. Fits a very different mold, but I feel like they like to take these kinds of games, these PS1 nostalgia games, the less popular sequel they'll do once or twice. It's a very pretty game. I actually really like looking at this game.
It is very pretty.
Yeah, not a whole lot to say on this one. Saga's had a presence at Limit Break. There's actually one other Saga game I did want to mention, but we'll get to that when we get to the other games offered. But this one ended up edging that one out for me personally.
Yeah. And then Ozzy burned a bit of extra time here relative to the rest of us. So Ozzy has both Chrono Cross and Star Ocean, the second story, in on this segment. Chrono Cross.
To be fair, this is, I will say this about Star Ocean right off the bat. Star Ocean, I more or less took because I was hung up on about it quite a bit, because it's like one of those games that constantly gets offered to the marathon. It's never been accepted, and I've always wondered why. And I wondered if this year was going to take it, because I was looking at like other games that felt very similar, felt a similar niche to me, and I immediately was drawn to the Tales of games, which, spoilers later on, Tales of games were selected by these two, but not me, because I think they're going to take Star Ocean over Tales.
It's a really
I think they're
janky.
going to give it a shit.
So it's a janky set to go on this year. The one thing about this game, I actually had this on my list until literally the last minute before we locked. Actually, it was after we locked, and I went back and redid it, but that's okay. But it's the most well-regarded game in the series casually. And again, it's because it started off as, like, the original Star Ocean was the Tales of Fantasia developers making something different. You know, they kind of, the Tales of series stuck with Namco, the original devs went on to make Star Ocean. So they hit a very similar audience in that regard. But this has been offered a lot and never taken, and part of it is that, like, it feels like it'll get done eventually, but I don't know if this is the year. I'd love for them to surprise me and actually see it in. I just, a little bit long for me to actually, you know, want to put my minutes towards it, I think.
Yeah, just for me, feels that niche, and I feel that when I compared everything else that I was looking for and what my overall selection, this is the one that I felt like was worth throwing a bone at, so to speak. Because ultimately, I am trying to make a guess here. And that's how I felt about Chrono Cross as well, because part of me it likes the game enough and it's such a good showing with two very good runners. Even though the run is more or less the same since its last showing, it's still a really good run. I love this game to death, and I can't help but be a little biased in picking it.
Absolutely.
I mean, Ash would still be there to run it, and Ash did a fantastic job with Spike. And then you also have Close to War, who is one of the craziest people I've ever met. I don't even know if I could say met, because I'm not sure I've met him in person, but he is a madman.
This is a guy who will be 10 hours into a Dragon Quest 8 run, have it go bad, and he'd reset and do another one.
So
he is kind of a madman.
He's kind of a person that I feel like you almost could reach for to just try to get him in, since I believe this is the first time he's offered to the marathon. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to reach for Chrono Cross a little bit, say, like, you know, we've done Trigger a lot recently, we want to do a different Chrono, it's a very solid offer for that. I just think you want a little bit more time for a game this long, and it hasn't happened yet where they've repeated a game over, like, about this length. And that's not to say they won't ever repeat games this length. I'm sure probably in this event or in the next event, they're going to have to start repeating longer games. It's just kind of the way the math works out. But I feel like sitting just one more event on this could go a long way.
Mm-hmm. It's a hard run to, like, the last one they did was really hard to top for this one.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be really, I don't think there's really anything that's changed much about the route of this game. It would just be you want to take it because you want to take it again. You want to fill up a night slot, or maybe put it in day to see how it does there. It is one of the most viewed VODs on the channel, but a little bit of that is also it has been on there for a long time.
It's been on there for a long time, and it also has one of the bigger names of the event, which we do believe seems to influence the YouTube metrics a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Star Ocean, I ended up not taking because, as you said, this one has been offered for literally every event, and they've never done it. They've also seemed to want to take, you know, the shorter Star Oceans quite often. They took 3 in 2017. They took 4 the first chance they could get for around the HD early release. So maybe they have some apprehensions about it. Anytime I've seen the run, it's like I don't think it quite matches up as a run to something like Star Ocean 4, which has a lot of overworld movement tech, relatively compared to it. But I don't think this is one that I don't think this one is, you know, never getting in. It's just I expect them to I think they have to surprise me on it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm expecting because we've seen a lot of similar takes from that PS1 era that were surprise takes, like the Alundra, the Legend of Legaia. So I kind of was kind of going into that direction with that as well, and we could easily see.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like I said, GK mentioned it, but we always talk about games like this is going to happen eventually. I just want them to surprise me with it. We said it about, for example, like when they did Final Fantasy VII at GDQ. It was never a game that was off the table. It was impossible to predict when they were going to like pull the trigger on it. Same thing with something like a Star Ocean 2. I feel they've taken enough other Star Oceans where they clearly are interested in the series. I just don't know when they're going to actually go into this one. And then again, this is casually the best one in the series. Is what people regard it as. So it'll happen eventually.
Yeah.
As a brief aside, speaking of Trigger, they did have some Chrono Trigger offers. I think none of us ended up taking them because they did Chrono Trigger twice in the previous 2 events, and we felt like they were strong about the SNES Final Fantasy. And if they take all the SNES Final Fantasy and and then Chrono Trigger as well, you're kind of burning all of the big like SNES Square games, and that would kind of leave a pretty small set of big kinds of games on that console for next year.
Yeah, they don't
it just takes a
necessarily
rest.
always do that because there was a year I believe where they did Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6 already.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that was a little bit of an odd year, and I don't know if they really were 100% the event would continue every year for a little while. Like they obviously wanted to, but if the event wasn't necessarily successful in the early years, then you might just not really have a reason to do the event in the future as a live event. I hope by now they're a little bit more foresight and like kind of plan out, okay, I know this game is a big game and would probably, it may raise an extra 5,000 for this event, but if we wait another year, it'll be 10,000 instead. I'd hope they consider things like that. Again, not necessarily, the numbers are a little off, but you get the idea. I'm thinking in GDQ numbers, not necessarily limit break runners or numbers.
By the way, did we skip over profile?
No, we haven't. I took a brief aside.
Yeah.
So finally, our last one, Valkyrie Profile. I feel like they've been wanting this particular game for quite a while. They took 2. They took Covenant of the Plume. They've taken every other Valkyrie Profile except the one that probably put that series on the map. It is a bit of a niche series. The copies of this game go for like pretty exorbitant amounts on eBay because it's one of the few classic PS1 RPGs that never got re-released on like PSN. It did get a PSP re-release, but that's it.
Yeah, there's a lot of very small print run RPGs on the PS1 as well that just kind of spiked in price. Another one that's even was offered was Tales of Eternia 2. Or Tales of Eternia. Like the US copies of the game are like $150. So but yeah, I mean, it's a great watch as somebody that's never played the game. It's kind of funny to see. There's a game that came out this year called Indivisible that very, very, very liberally borrowed elements from Valkyrie Profile. Definitely made me want to play Valkyrie Profile as well. So yeah, it's a good watch. It's the right length, and again, they always have a couple games like this. Like last year, they had was it Dark? I want to say.
It was 2 years ago. They had Dark Do, Valkyrie.
Yeah. No, I'm saying there was another Square Vagrant Story.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a similar similar type of thing where it's an adjacent, somewhat niche Square RPG on the PS1 that would perform well.
Yeah, they like taking their Suikodens, their Wild Arms, their Vagrant Stories. Like these games, they're on a bit more of a cult classic bubble for PS1, but this one they've never had. They've had 2, and they've had which I feel like they've wanted to take Valkyrie Profile for a long time. They've just never had the offer.
Yep. So, all right, and on to the next one. We have our miscellaneous PlayStation.
So when we say miscellaneous PlayStation, we're referring to all PlayStation platforms here. So this is not just PS1.
Yeah. Basically, this is kind of PlayStation games that you would associate being exclusive to PlayStation consoles that aren't made by Square. Which sounds very niche, but there's enough of them where this kind of felt like just a decent place to stick a bunch of games.
There's 7 games on here. This is also probably the section we were by far they least in unison about.
We were all
Yeah.
over the place.
Yeah, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3 just gets tons and tons and tons of great RPGs, and boy, do we have some selections here.
All right, let's get the elephant out of the room here. Mr. Gulo2 and his Persona 4 run, which you both took.
I'm actually
I
mad
res-
Ozzy took this, because if I was the only one that took this, I could at least, Ozzy called the big one last year. He's the only one of us that actually did.
Yep, last year I predicted, and I was the only one who successfully predicted that Final Fantasy X was going to get in last year, and that solidified my victory. This year, I'm messing with Ghoul. Remove my submission, my take. I don't want it.
There's a lot of difficulties with this run, even still. Like, the time is down an hour on what the offer was last year. You still have issues where...
Those are dumb manips.
You still have an issue right now where... Well, first of all, the biggest one is you got 3 hours of VCR fast-forward noise. And that's not great. The other, problem is I'm still 30 minutes behind Molsky, which is ridiculous, but... So my time doesn't look that good in a vacuum, but the gap between me and third place is the same as the gap between me and first. It's just crazy how high the skill ceiling is for a game this long. And I'm, again, the second best person at the world in it. And we have a lot of new stuff. Every year this game gets broken more. Please don't make me do this when we're manipulating even more and finishing in 8 hours.
That's what it takes, Ghoul, right? That's what it takes.
Persona hype is really high. They have a lot of spin-offs for 5 coming out this year. 5 was gangbusters when it came out.
The other thing about
Getting
this...
in Smash.
Yeah. I also think it's the only really viable Persona run for the marathon. You can't do 3 under any circumstances at the event. It's just, it can't happen. As long as the charity is Nami, you cannot do Persona 3.
Yeah, not a game where your main method of summoning your persona is pointing a gun to your head and pulling a trigger.
Yeah, and then 5, you would have to make up some kind of an arbitrary showcase category where you just do the dungeons.
Which is the coolest part of that run.
I mean, it's the best part of the run. But you'd have to have the committee okay with that. You probably lose stuff like naming incentives. And you're still looking at probably, I think, 7 hours to do just the dungeons in the game. So, if you ever want to get
6 hours.
If you want to get Persona after Persona 3, this is your best take. Because you also can't do vanilla Persona 4 because you can't skip cutscenes in it.
Yeah, I ended up going off a little bit. I feel they want to have a presence of Shin Megami Tensei at Limit Break, and Digital Devil Saga 2 follows up on them, taking it in 2018. It's not the best follow-up, admittedly. It is unfortunate that there's a 2-year gap there, but, it is SMT, it is Digital Devil Saga. Pink Pajamas does really well with almost every game that he runs, so I definitely think that they would consider this. This was one of my last-minute kind of, longer runs that I put in.
Yeah, first of all, it's understandable putting your minutes towards something else. 9 hours to anything is a tough call, but DDS2... I feel kind of a weird ways about this one. They could do it, but I feel like if you were going to do it, the most valuable time, again, would have been to do it the year after you did DDS1. And since that didn't happen then, I don't know how much it really means to do the second one. DDS is, it's a fine SMT series, but it's not like you're doing Nocturne or anything like that. And, the combat's fine. I mean, anything with SMT's combat is going to be a decent speedrun. It's just kind of the way that system works. When you're playing an RPG with SMT combat, it's going to be a good run. But ultimately, I just didn't think it really felt like it was worth it at that point when you can do a bigger game or other ones. So I don't have it on mine, but I would love to see PPJ get a chance to do this. Again, fantastic commentator, fantastic runner, and the run itself, again, it's really good. So, we had a couple of other agreements. You two both had Xenosaga 2 in?
Yeah,
Yep.
so Xenosaga, I think I took X later. So Xenosaga is one of those series that people know. They've never had a run for it. Xenosaga 1 has some flaws. Xenosaga 3 was offered, but that's closer to 6 hours. 2 is sort of the dark horse of the series, but the runner Fasta has put in a lot of time to this. I actually loved reading his submission pitch. He clearly has a lot of interest in showing this game off at a marathon. So I think if they'd pull the trigger on a Xenosaga, this would be a good time to do so.
Yeah, and having gone and into the stream and watch him do a little bit of just his normal like stream schedule and everything, he's entertaining. He's extremely entertaining, and that kind of thing can help carry a game even further than a game itself. And I like it.
Yeah, this definitely was on my radar. Like, I was very close to putting it in. I just kind of ended up going with different directions on some of my longer takes. It's a great pitch. It's a great offer. The one downside of this is that 2 is kind of the least popular in the series casually. Like, 3 is considered like the best game. 1 is the one that people played a bit more. This one kind of gets lost in the mix a little bit. I don't think it's like a killer or anything. It's right on the bubble, I think.
Yeah, if this gets in, this is probably like a 6 a.m. 4 to 10 a.m. run where everyone's getting coffee and poor Fasta has to sit there and entertain people while he's barely just been woken up.
Good luck, buddy.
He's a good dude.
Yeah. Then the only other agreement we had on PlayStation was Rhapsody: A Musical Adventure, which me and Ozzy both had on our list.
Yep, I think that this game is extremely charming. It's a little bit simple, not the most fastest and more impressive game. It's the charm.
It is one of the cutest games on the list by far. Like, if you kind of use this as like a palate cleanser after your silly block, I think it works beautifully. And like I said, the game does just enough to really, I think, justify it. Like, I remember the first time I saw this game, I believe the first time I was offered was last year. I was like, oh my god, this game is awesome. I love this. So, just kind of one of those games that I've got a feeling on. And it does enough to justify its keep, I feel like.
This would definitely not be a take that I would say that they... I would not say... I would not, like, have reservations about them ever taking this game. I ended up just putting my hours somewhere else, so it would... This wasn't to say that it was anything bad, it was just I put my hours elsewhere.
Yep.
Dragon's Crown, Ozzy, you have the floor.
Sorry, I was typing something. Alright, so... just to clarify, I wasn't actually messing with Bull. I do think Persona 4 Golden actually has a chance.
It's the best chance it's had
It's
in a
just
while.
so
I just
much
need
fun
them to
to mess
surprise
with
me.
Ghoul. I don't get off. It's too easy to mess with Ghoul.
He just wants
when I
revenge
get
for the
opportunity.
Dokapon game is what actually this is.
We'll get to that later, sir. But Dragon's Crown Pro, yeah, it's the game I offered. Yeah, I voted for my own game. What? Got something to say? Want to find out?
Yeah, I mean, they did just finally do Odin Sphere, so they've actually done a Vanillaware game.
This is the more popular one by a
It's the
fairly
one that sold
substantial
much
margin.
better. The downside of this one is I still wonder if they have content objections for it, because it seemed like they had that in the past.
Yeah, Dwarf isn't sorceress as a character, but there's definitely their share of standout NPCs in this game. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, honestly, if I could give any like good comparison to Dragon's Crown Pro as a speedrun, it's very similar to like a Diablo speedrun, like Diablo 2, Diablo 3, where you pick a class and you run with that class.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the run it's a solid enough run. I think it gets a little. I mean, there's a lot of throwing rocks. So but other than that, it's beautiful. It's anything by Vanillaware is just a treat for the eyes for 2 hours. I just am worried that they're gonna have the same content concerns and just kind of put the hours elsewhere rather than ask if it's okay to put it in the marathon. So, but hey, I don't have any issues with people picking their own games. We don't offer these games because, I mean, I always say offer anything that you would be willing to run, but I mean, we pretty much offer because we think they'd be good picks and we want to run them. So if Ozzy thinks it's going to get in, that's totally fine. I agree.
If we sound exceedingly vain, One, we believe in our games. Two, we know a little bit more about them than probably most of the other things on the list. And three, look at the disclaimer above.
Yep, basically. The disclaimer
And
is
I
there
can-
for a reason. If you haven't read
And
it, please do.
I can personally vouch that at least Dragon's Crown Pro at least turns out some amount of donations from another marathon that I'm not going to bring up here, but I'm going to say that it did more than I originally expected, and it makes me wonder how it would do in RPG Limit Break, where they would kind of attract that crowd that obviously this game got a remake. This is Dragon's Crown Pro. It was PS4 re-release. It's still kind of relevant.
Yeah. And then lastly, we had our Tales of series. It's funny that these ended up under PlayStation, considering like the biggest one they did was a GameCube game. But hey, sometimes you get them where you can get them. I took Eternia, GK took Zillia, and Ozzy took Tales of Star Ocean 2. But
Correct.
so to me, Eternia was the excuse to find a run for Close to War. I don't know if they like Limit Break tends to be less reachy for runners specifically than like something like a GDQ would be, but at the same time, I think this is one of the best 2D Tales to watch. I think he can get a hold of an either an English copy from somebody to borrow, or they could find some way to get this game done in English without too many issues. And from what I looked at the text, doing it in English shouldn't cause any problems as far as like time goes. But at the same
that's
time,
a lot of ifs.
I mean, there's a lot of ifs there, but to me, it's the best run that Close to War had to offer. And I thought it was the strongest Tales on offer. And they've actually gone, I think, a little bit out of their way more for Tales in recent years, between the Fantasia run and taking Zestiria last year, which blew me away. I never would have called Zestiria. So I'm starting to think they may have enough metrics on their end to think they'll always take a Tales. This is the only one they haven't done. And it's the only one that I really felt confident in them taking.
The only one they haven't done of the ones offered.
Yeah.
Specifically. There's been a lot of Tales that have done, and I don't think they're likely to ever take Abyss.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But on the subject of Zillia, so Jude is a fairly new category. They did Mila last time.
We had a bidding war, technically, but yeah.
Transquina has been, like, on this game for a long time, running it in a lot of different things, and I feel like that's kind of the game that I see them most likely to throw the Tales of series a bone, given that I felt like I was a little surprised by Zestiria, so I'm going off a similar logic. I understand, though, that Zillia is, among the Tales fan base, not necessarily the most popular run.
It has its fans, people that played it. I think it's kind of a meh game overall. I don't think the two styles mesh particularly well until they got to Berseria. My bigger issue with it is that more so than even Symphonia, where Parabol became a meme because of how spammable and strong that ability is, the old man is too damn good in Zillia. Fireball is one of the most broken abilities I've ever seen, and you get it when the first time you start using Rowan.
Gotta love spell canceling.
Not even that. It's because Fireball, you can amp the damage on it. It burns, which does percent max health damage to bosses even. And you cast it 4 times for a single MP cost. By the end of the run, you're gaining MP because you're hitting them 4 times with the spell and only spending 1 TP's worth to cast it. It is the most bonkers ability I've ever seen in a Tales game. And that includes Parabol, which hits 4 times and has ridiculous hit stun. So, I think it's just a little overpowered, and I don't know if they necessarily will feel the need to go back to that well. It is the shortest Tales. It's the most popular in the West. Eternia is very niche in comparison. So that's the downside to Eternia is, again, it's a $150 PS1 game, which should tell you that it's relatively hard to play. Zillia was right when about the JRPG Renaissance happened on the PS3, so a lot of people played it as one of their first Tales. There's a lot of nostalgia for the game. It would be a very good pick if they took it. I just think that there's, a better game to take elsewhere, and the committee may agree or may disagree with me, or they may take none of them. Who knows?
Yeah, while you're saying that, I'm just having flashbacks to our run.
Yeah, that's still one of the most fun runs I've ever had.
Despite how late in the middle of the morning it was.
I was
we were
so exhausted.
tired.
I also didn't sleep at all the 2 nights before because I did my Symphonia run, or not my Crystal Chronicles run. Tails on the brain. I did the Crystal Chronicles run the night before, and then I did that, and my brain was just straight mush. Thankfully, Elise is really easy to play.
Yes. Go, Tipo.
Oh, gosh.
Alright, we talked about everything here, including Digital Devil Saga, so...
On to Nintendo.
Alright, Nintendo.
This one ended up being a little bit smaller. I think
Nintendo, I guess we've gone over the categories and kind of what they've meant for the actual like event. Nintendo's been kind of the hardest one for them to actually kind of fill, I feel like. It's kind of, they take what they can get a lot of time in this. Like the Mario finally started happening more consistently like in the last 2 years, but games like Golden Sun, games like Xenoblade, they kind of don't have as many opportunities to show those. It's not like, say, a Final Fantasy where you're going to get 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then like 12, 13 every single year offered. So it's just kind of an interesting one. They kind of take what they can get. Our picks this year, we have... This is a category we're completely unanimously in agreement on. We have Golden Sun, Super Pape, and Xenoblade X.
All right, so let's... The easiest one we're probably going to talk more about than we really need to, but Golden Sun. You only really need to say one word when you see this one, and that is Plexa.
Yeah, Plexa offered to a live marathon. I would stretch for this. If this was 7 hours, I probably would still have it in. So, Golden Sun's a game they've wanted. Like, they got Lost Age by Sid, but they've wanted the original one. It's a little bit janky sometimes because most runners hate the intro, but I don't think it matters. Plexa is just like, Plexa is a god at this game, and this game has so many cool things going for it. It's one of the most nostalgic Nintendo JRPGs ever made. It's got to be in.
Yeah, that's one of those names. If you're not, and you're not familiar with this, think the way DSS is for a lot of 3D Sonic games. Imagine that applying to Golden Sun. That is Plexa. He has like practically reverse engineered this game. He has come up with so many things for the routes. If you have any questions about any Golden Sun game, he is the go-to person. Like, he is a name you almost reach for. I know he's not the biggest name in speedrunning, but he is by far the biggest name with Golden Sun.
Yeah. It's kind of like a similar instance would be like FFT with Claude last year. Even though like they believe they'd done FFT the year before even, you can reach if it's Claude. It's the same thing here. And they've also wanted to do this anyway. We're talking about this more than we need to. Golden Sun is, in my opinion, the lock of the marathon.
Yeah, that's bias really, talking a little bit with you a little bit, but
the only reservation for us is not if, but it's which category.
Yeah, basically. There's like 3 of them.
80%.
All of them are viable, although I don't think they do intro skip. I know that it's like 20 minutes of cutscenes, but it just feels better for a marathon to do the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is the game's first showing at the event. Just show the freaking cutscene.
Real quick, Fire Emblem is under strategy. Again, categories are arbitrary here.
Should have put that in bold print, don't you think?
You know, we do what we can because we must.
We are idiots after all.
Yeah. So next up, we have Super Pape. They always put in a Mario RPG. This is, I think, the only real one they have offered, if I remember correctly.
It's the only. Yes. It's the only game with Mario in the title. And they have wanted, the community for this game has wanted to get this game into a big marathon any way they can for a very long time. Yoshi's finally offered it. He is like second or third in this game. It's a very solid run. Like, you finally give a new flavor of Paper Mario.
Yeah.
This game is so charming, dude.
Yeah, it's a great run. It's a great watch. Yoshi has done incredibly well for the marathon in the past. This is a pretty big no-brainer as well.
Yeah.
Then lastly, all 3 of us took Xenoblade X.
The game we thought was going to get in last year.
Yeah, you'd think going back to that same well. They ended up giving Legrand Tales of Zestiria, which I thought was a really interesting decision. It's not one that I necessarily agree with, although I kind of understand why. The question here then is, is that something the committee thinks on Xenoblade X, which I don't think is true. I think they just felt they really wanted a Tales in some form, and Zestiria was the best on offer. And in that case, you don't really feel that like maybe they didn't want to give Legrand 12 hours worth of 2 runs. I don't know. It's a weird one in that regard. I know that when this game was originally developing as a speedrun, it had some issues as far as not being as good to watch, but I think those have kind of been ironed out over time, and I think it's a solid watch now. But I don't know. I can't see this not getting in, so I'm going to have it on my list.
I'm only a little worried because if it somehow doesn't get in this year, it makes me wonder why. And if that this might become just like next year it becomes this game that gets offered and we're like, oh god, it's that pitfall. Are we gonna fall into the pitfall?
Yeah, there's times where you kind of get into an issue where we think like it happened in the GDQ one more often than this, but you kind of the joke with us when you did the GDQ Games Prediction Show was Mario Party. I think we predicted Mario Party 7 times, and that turd never frickin' got in. And it always ruined us in prediction shows. And eventually we said, okay, fine, we will not predict this ever again. Xenoblade X wasn't anywhere near that point, but I really hope that's not true.
Same.
So, yeah. I think we can go ahead and move on to, I believe, Shen's favorite category. I'm trying to give GK a little bit of time to come back, but... our next pick, we got Sega. So Sega's a bit of an odd category. First of all, they tend to go for 3 of these per event. 1 or 2 Genesis games, maybe one other game something like a Valkyria Chronicles that was on a different system, but still like a Sega property. Things like that. Phantasy Star, they've done a lot of Shining Force in the past. It's another game that there's a lot. But so pretty much anything associated with them, either their consoles or them. They've done like Crusader Ascenti, which was a Genesis game.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of runners come out over the years with to RPG Limit Break with some pretty interesting and somewhat obscure Sega RPGs. And we actually went ahead and took 1 and 2 here on our list. Phantasy Star 2, probably being the more renowned series of Sega RPGs.
So the thing about Phantasy Star 2, I'm actually amazed this hasn't actually been in yet. I believe it was Taken last year, and then the runner... No. Like Taken 2 years ago, and the runner dropped. I know this was Taken, but hasn't been done. It's a bit of a weird run. It's very glitched. I mean, very glitched. For better or for worse. But at the same time, I don't hate it for that. This is one of the best history lessons you could do for a 42-minute run as well. Just because, this game came out before Final Fantasy IV was even announced. Yeah, okay, GK got us covered there.
Yeah, Phantasy Star, it was taken 2018, the runner backup couldn't go.
Right. So, in that situation,
yeah.
I feel like they've been looking for a chance to get it in again. It's a good enough run for what it is. It's very glitched, but the commentary is going to be great. And it's Bick again, who's going to make this hilarious, which is great. And this is just a huge game that just hasn't ever been in somehow. Shining Force CD, we're all unanimous on this, which I'm kind of surprised at. Also, Shining Force not being under strategy. But
right? Well, we had to give Centro here something else to hold. He needs the extra weight. Or else it's not a challenge.
I believe this was on backup last year. I do have some reservations that this is by far the least played Shining Force game. But at the same time, they've gone kind of out of their way for Shining Force, and the games have kind of merited them going out of their way. They've done incredibly well when they've been in. So I think it might be a little bit of a reach, because I think at 4.5 hours for Shining Force CD, but at the same time, it's Shining Force and it's performed well.
It's also one of the shorter Shining Forces that's ever been in.
Yeah. And then lastly, we have Sylvan Tale. This is another one that was taken in the past, I believe, and then the runner couldn't make it. They tend to, if that happens, the run, next time it gets offered, they do it. So, and not that, he doesn't deserve it again. If it got it in the past, it clearly deserves it. and Sylvantel's a great little cute Game Gear game.
And it clearly shows not. I wouldn't say deserves is the right word. It's rather the community liked it enough that they wanted to have it in, but they couldn't find the time to put it in.
Right.
And I definitely feel that they will probably take it in this year based on previous history. They did it with Odin Sphere. They've done it with can't talk. But they've done it with other games. It's proven history at this point.
Yep, that's kind of my thought process on it. I almost didn't have this on my list. This was the game that I said, oh shoot, that's not on my list somehow. And after walking, I put this on and took something else off.
Yeah,
I think this is where I cut Birth by Sleep to the bidding war to make room for Sylvantel. But, yeah. So, that is our Sega. It's a little bit shorter of a section. It's kind of a weird category to define because, again, there's not like one singular thing they do. Usually they'll do one Phantasy Star, one Shining Force. They're like one Phantasy Star up to one Shining Force, and then maybe one or two extras. So.
Yeah, they typically just like to have some Sega representation in some form. So even if we don't necessarily see like Shining Force CD here, we're going to see something else.
Yep, I'd agree. So moving on, we have our strategy section. So strategy is a category they tend to do. It's a bit weird. They'll do one Fire Emblem every year, just about. They'll do Tactics every other-ish year. They did just do Tactics last year. And then kind of a couple of extras. Disgaea gets one game in every year. And then I'm trying to, from there, they did Valkyria Chronicles the first year, and then, a couple others.
Yeah. My question to myself was I was wondering, was this the year they wanted to give the Disgaea formula a break? Because we've seen them want it to occasionally kind of, put themselves to a halt before they go a certain distance. And we're encroaching that with Disgaea, I feel. And it's never like Disgaea never gets offered. I've always felt like there's going to be a Disgaea offer in the future.
Yeah, it's one of those things. This is the only Disgaea they haven't done. So that helps. They're not repeating. They're not trying to, repeat a game they've done in the past. Next year will be interesting for me, especially if they take 4 complete, because that'll be the first time they have to repeat a Disgaea if they want to get specifically one or a Disgaea adjacent game in. Unless they do I think D2 is technically a different game that they haven't done. Because Disgaea D2 and Disgaea 2 are different games.
Of course they are. This series is over too much to follow. But I do agree that they do like to take these series. And I would not be surprised if Disgaea gets in, without a doubt. It's just that I'm hinging on them wanting to take a step back this year. That's all.
Yeah, it's I don't know. To me, again, GK makes fun of me all the time for it. I have a habit of looking for way more metrics than I have any right to. And these runs have consistently been among the best performing runs on YouTube. The run's only 2 hours, so there's something to me that says if they have a 2-hour Disgaea that they haven't done before, they should throw it in. And that's the mean way of saying it. So, I think the run stands on its own even without that fact. But when you factor in the series and the popularity that it's had in the past, they should do it again. As far as the games we agreed on, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Bidding War, and New Game Plus. The way that I've had New Game Plus described to me is that essentially it just means less time in the monastery and more time in the actual missions, which is kind of the better parts of the run. I don't know if it's necessarily better to do New Game Plus or New Game. They do have a New Game offer as well by a different runner. But to me, that sounds like you get a little bit of a different flavor than what you had at the GDQ run. And I think less time in the monastery is probably a net positive for the marathon as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it's the equivalent of skipping cutscenes in your speed run. If you can do it, you typically just want to do it.
Yeah. So, I don't know. They could also do New Game. That wouldn't shock me. I do think Three Houses probably gets done. I do think... I mentioned it a little bit in the call, and you guys keep shooting me down. I wouldn't be 100% shocked to see Shadows of Valencia here, personally. but the safest pick would be Three Houses. And the reason that Shadows of Valencia is that Three Houses was done at GDQ, and Shadows of Valencia hasn't been shown anywhere, so they could get like a different flavor there. But Shadows of Valencia is a weird game in the series in that regard. So I don't know if I would like. I'm not bold enough to predict that, but it is something to consider.
Yeah, it's definitely not off the table. It's just this is ultimately what we.
It's one of the
we're
biggest games
pretty
of the last year.
confident
It won the People's Choice Game Awards for the Game Awards as Game of the Year.
Man,
So-
imagine telling yourself that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Past me, Fire Emblem still exists, and it's one of the best-selling series ever.
So then we have Valkyria Chronicles. This was done at the very first one by Nitrodon. This would be done by Sniper Dog. It would be a repeat category. They haven't done this series since. I think it's a pretty solid watch for marathons. Like, the strategies in these games are incredibly unique and really well done. It's a weird case because it, more so than any game at the first marathon, and I'm including my own Crystal Chronicles run, by the way, that didn't finish because it crashed. I think
Yes.
Valkyria Chronicles got the short end of the stick. They didn't.
It really did. They didn't know how to approach that game at all, and it ultimately suffered for it.
Yeah.
Its incentives did not meet. It had some bumps during the run, I believe.
Yeah, the run itself went really well outside of the fact that I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open while commentating. But like, since it was in the first day of the marathon, they didn't know how to price incentives, and this was back before they opened incentives as they went even. So a lot just didn't get met for this game, and I've always felt that it did the game an injustice. And they've said in the past that that was the game they felt they did, like, the dirtiest or like the worst buy as far as like, they didn't set it up to succeed. It had a lot of incentives. It followed 2 games, you know. It started at like 8 a.m., followed a bunch of runs that didn't necessarily like intend to raise a ton of money. Like Crystal Chronicles was pretty dead during it. And it's just such a different era at this point, and this game like has only aged better with time.
It helps that this game is still getting re-releases out there by Sega.
Yeah.
So the game is still pretty relevant, and people, the community that have stuck with the game, have only helped improve it thus far. This game deserves a second chance.
Yeah. And some of this is personal bias, again, or potentially from me, because, again, this is a series I've had a lot of influence in the past. I did a lot of the DLC rooting for Valkyria Chronicles 1. I was the first person to root 2 before Wandering Mind took over and kind of completely tore that game to shreds. So, but at the same time, I think it earns its own keep. As far as games, the other game that we didn't have an agreement on, Ozzy and I both had Advance Wars normal campaign. This is a weird one because it's not really an RPG. Like, there's no level up system. There's not really a traditional advancement system the same way there is in Fire Emblem. But it's adjacent enough where it definitely has the same audience as Fire Emblem. And this series, it's another one that I think has aged very well over time.
Yep, it's just legitimately fun, kooky, weird, and different. And that's something that I've always looked towards for RPG Limit Break, especially since because the pool selection of games you can put into a marathon like RPG Limit Break is infinitely smaller than something like GDQ. So anytime when I see something like this that still appeals to the RPG crowd while being good looking, fun to watch, and still relevant with most people that grew up with it, yeah.
Yeah, and they tend to do a couple of these, like games that, like, I wouldn't call Alundra necessarily an RPG either, and that was done at a previous event. They do games like this not super uncommonly. So when you factor that in for, 80 minutes, I think it's a great pick. And I believe it was on backup last year as well.
Yes, it was.
So not too much to go on there. I think we're pretty good on our strategy section. Next is Silly. So this is something they started at, I believe, the 3rd Limit Break, I want to say. And they've done it every year since, where they have a bunch of bad or games that have just kind of funny premises, in the case of something like a Citizens of Earth, and just try to have fun.
Yeah.
And the idea of this it's meant to be the same thing it is at like AGDQ, where it's kind of supposed to be this like palate cleanser and a way to kind of just have fun, laughing at games, doing this hobby, this weird hobby we all enjoy. And
Yeah,
even
they're not
like
necessarily awful games either.
yeah, and even before there was an official block, the first year there was the Demon Rush, which is where the picture clearly is from, and then the next year there was Draken. They liked having these little bad palate cleanser games even before they made an official block. I don't. It's a weird one for me this year looking at this because they've said in the past that if they don't feel they have enough for this, they won't actually make a block out of it. I'm not sure I really like it as much as I did last year, like trying to make a full block, but I don't know that there's enough for them to say that they don't do this. GK and Ozzy may have different opinions than me on it, where you guys may feel that like no, the silly block is totally fine and ready to go, but I don't think that they're going to not have it. So, anyways, moving on. These are the games we picked. Another group that we had a very different set of opinions on.
Yeah.
Starting off on games
Yeah.
I'll say for the stuff that we had like the same ones on. We have Deadly Towers. It was all three of us. 40 minutes. Do you want to go on this a little bit, Ozzy?
Yes, Deadly Towers. Dragon Dark. I don't know what is. It's got to be one of his most iconic games that he himself still plays for some reason, and yet people want to watch him. So why not have people watch him and raise money at the same time? It seems like a good plan to me.
Yeah, Dark gets a run pretty much every year. It's a very easy game to take on that. The length is such an easy commitment. It's a pretty likely run to take. The only other one we all agreed on was Dragon Slayer Legend of Heroes, which the way GK sold me on this is that apparently the voice acting on this had people in stitches to the point that like they couldn't commentate when this was on the channel last for what was it? Was it for Questing for Glory 2?
It was for Questing for Glory, yeah.
So when you have that, like that's the kind of energy you really need to like really feel good committing to 2.5 hours of a run like this. And honestly, I just love Stodel's commentary, so like I combine those two, and I feel pretty comfortable that know what?
When I'm
back. Sorry.
Welcome back. Let me just say this before. right. Let me say this real quick before you get on any further, Ghost. Last year, when I was kind of going through the predictions, one of the things I missed out on that I ultimately regret was underestimating Schulteheim in particular, because he has a really good way of projecting himself, and that is something very few runners are actually capable of doing. Like talking about your Spike Vegetas, your Kizarons, just people that they have a presence. And Schulteheim is definitely one of those people. He isn't quite as well known, obviously, but maybe give him a year or two. I'm waiting on it. So
he runs these obscure.
I'd say his games are a little too obscure, but it's pretty good praise. I enjoy listening to him commentate. So I think combined with that, with how this game apparently went over the first time it was done on the channel, period, I think you need something like this for your silly block for sure. And I think it's a pretty safe take just for that.
So when Rhythm Song did this for Questing for Glory, Mike Uyama was dying laughing in the chat. He's like, please, for the love of God, this needs to be in the next marathon.
Yeah.
So if we can get Mike on couch for this, I think we're sold.
I think Mike's not going this year because of schedule reasons, but
that's sad.
You can bet that he's going to stay up late to watch this.
God bless that man.
And then from there, everyone went different directions.
We had opinions, okay?
So I'm going to save the last one for last. GK, why is Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring going to go in the silly block?
So, I mean, it was in for Questing for Glory. This run is entertaining in some of the weirdest ways. Honestly, the biggest knock against it is one of the glitches actually ends up cutting the music for a fair portion of the run. But Pete is always a treat to watch. I'm sad you don't believe in our boy Pete Dorr.
This was one of my last ones out. I believe in Pete Dorr, but it was really close.
Yeah, so we're kind of talking about like a game that they tend to do as like a keynote, or at least like a long kind of end to your bad silly block. Mine ended up being Maka Maka, which I just have this kind of hunch about. This game is ridiculously silly. It is legendary bad. It is not Hoshi legendary bad, but it is pretty infamous. Um, and it's just goofy to watch. And Wolf, when he did a marathon submission video to Blitz, he did like the live translation of this game, circumventing one of the biggest problems with Japan-only games, that being that nobody can read it. I think that this run would have the kind of energy that would just be really enjoyable. I understand its flaws, and this was one of the last games that I ended up putting on my list, and I understand why you guys put your 3 hours somewhere else, but that's just me.
Yeah, it's to me like I agree that like if you need a keynote, you could maybe make this your quote unquote keynote game, like your Lunar Dragon Song, the Demon Rush, your Virtual Highlight. To me, 3 hours of a Japanese only game that maybe 2 people in the audience will have heard of ahead of time. Like the only reason, like one of the things that Hoshi that made it work is that, like, people would see Hoshi on the schedule and they go, "What the heck is this weird Japanese titled game?" And people would say, "No, don't miss Hoshi." Like that room was packed because like there was like this whisper that like, "Trust me, it's an hour. It'll be the funniest hour of your life." Telling people the same thing for a 3-hour run is so damn hard.
It's a lot. The longer the joke is, the more easy it just gets tired.
Yeah. So like to me, and I even said like in our calls, Hoshi at an hour was fantastic. If Hoshi was an hour 45, I would be very very like puzzled as whether or not it would actually work.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this goes a step past that to 3 hours now. And I don't think that you can really carry... Like, it only will carry so far before the joke of this is a weird-ass Japanese game will get old.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, nothing against DeWolf. DeWolf is one of the best marathon commentators and one of the best people at dealing with obscure games like this.
I will say this, judging by the way this game can go, he told me that the estimate, could well be 230 at some point. Now, admittedly, that kind of goes both ways. On the one hand, it may end up being a much shorter run. On the other hand, it might mean it's not quite as optimized. But I think that I could trust Wolf to like get that down. Again, this is like one of the last games that I ended up taking.
Yeah, it's always difficult to kind of like take a pick when it comes to the silly games selection, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you have to wonder, is it worth taking this over something that a runner offered that put a lot of serious amount of time into to try to get into the marathon?
DeWolf actually put a lot of time.
Yeah, I'm not even saying DeWolf wouldn't have put the effort.
I don't even think it's
to me, it's my issue that I even have with like Awful Block for AGDQ, is that sometimes it's hard to like decide like, for a 30-minute game, it's almost always harmless. Like if something like that happens, at 3 hours, that's a pretty significant investment in a game.
Yeah, I agree.
So, but I don't know. I do agree this could work as your keynote game. I just don't. I'm not feeling it personally, and they'd have to surprise me for me to actually pick this, I think. Ozzy, you had 2 silly block picks here that were a little different. Why don't you go over those a little bit?
Speaking of DeWolf, Half Minute Hero. This I thought was something that they hadn't done in a while. It's definitely something that they're inclined to take. I think they really like to take a game that's along these lines in the past. The games that look like very simple, clean retro RPGs, but they have that twist that hey, I'm going around and my party is actually an obstacle behind me that's getting longer and longer and longer as things goes on. Just those little twists. And Half Minute Hero is one of the better games for that. That looks impressive, looks fast, which is always a plus, and you get an hour and a half of DeWolf never breathing.
Oh man, that poor man.
I really shouldn't have to say anything more than this.
It's amazing how bad YouTube is at shuffle, by the way. I'm just going to point that out. We've definitely gone through 3 songs repeated on a 120 song playlist. Okay, anyways, continue on.
Yeah, and the other game here, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
I'm not even sure
it's
this
not
really
listed
fits.
here.
I'm not even sure this really fits the silly, to be honest. This run is weird. So this game is actually like has way better sprite work than it has any business having. Like,
For the
it's
record,
it's a better watch than it has any right to be.
For the record, for you, because it's not listed here and people don't know, this is a Game Boy Color title.
This game has sprite work that rivals like Game Boy Shantae. That is a compliment of the highest praise.
Yeah, it's very nice sprite work. It looks great. It's a little bit of a stretch to even say silly block. I just think we didn't know where better to place it. And like, there's something just kind of funny about playing like a turn-based JRPG Harry Potter game. That like I'm sure you could like.
It's the kind of game that I felt like if it got in, it would be hammed up, you know, because it's Harry Potter.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be something you could make fun of plenty. Like, you'd make fun of it a bit and then talk about, like, it definitely looks like the game seemed to be kind of a passion of love in some ways, which is really cool. Like, that's really nice, I think. I'd be curious to see it. I don't know if it will happen. I think for me, it's just a little bit longer. Kind of one of the bigger problems, I think, for a silly block for me this year is, like, the lack of real good slam dunk 40-minute runs. So I feel like you're going a little bit longer than you do on most silly block games. So it's almost hard. I think that makes it a little hard to like feel like too good about any predictions.
Can I just say one thing real quick? Because there's a few other licensed games I don't think we have on here, but like, man, some of the licensed games offers this year were really good.
Yeah, licensed. It's interesting because they don't tend to take them very much. I think the only other game I can think of that was 100% based on a license was Magic Knight Rayearth, and that was not taken to have anything to do with the license because. I don't think anybody really. There are fans of the original like '90s anime, but that's not why you took that game. And they haven't ever done those, and I don't know how well some of those would fit. But like, I had Adventure Time, for example, that run on my list for a long time. Had kind of the right little bits of glitchiness to go on with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Another licensed
really
game that was like really good looking was the Full Metal Alchemist run by Easyscape. Was one of the last cuts on my list.
That one was weird because like we saw that run last year and we thought this run looks way more interesting than it has any right to be. Its movement works. It's got some really funny stuff where you just repeatedly hit things with a hammer over and over again. But that run was backup last year, which we probably wouldn't give it as much pause if not for that. Usually when a game is backup, like that usually says this might have a chance.
Yeah. But yeah, the main thing giving me pause about actually going in on them is how rarely they've done anything with a license. And until they kind of break the barrier on that a little bit more and give me a game with a more modern license, I can't predict them. Another game that I would love to see that like has a licensed game that would even fit the silly block really well is the Dragon Ball Super Nintendo game. I think it's hysterical to watch for 40 minutes.
Do it, you cow. No, I'm just kidding.
I would love to see them take it because, again, 40 minutes of Dragon Ball Z abridged jokes is great for a silly block. But I also just don't see them doing it because they've had it offered a couple times and never done it. And until they kind of just, break the barrier, I'm just going to kind of leave those off my list for now.
I happen to think that you and I probably vastly overrate those runs because of our own.
Yeah, but I mean,
I
don't think having a fondness for Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Z Abridged is necessarily uncommon for people that are going to be watching the marathon.
I don't think the games committee is looking for that. But I know the Dragon Ball Z games were like our pet picks for many years.
Yeah.
Not even just abridged jokes. It's just seeing a Dragon Ball game where you see like Krillin one-shotting Frieza is hilarious.
Yeah.
And then Krillin woke up.
Yeah, it's there's good and bad to it for sure. I think it could do well. I think it'd be fun. I just until they do it, I'm not predicting it. Again, my list isn't necessarily what I want to see. There's a lot of games that I would take that are not on the list. if it was my marathon,
Yeah.
but it's not. So my goal is using again the past 5 years of data we have and trying to pinpoint what they're doing for the next one.
Yeah, but speaking of which, we kind of did. We haven't reached them yet, but Gold, tell us why you picked Quest 60.
Um, so to me, again, I don't love a lot of the silly block takes, and at that point, I was looking and I'm like, what are they gonna do that's just a bad game that people know? And one of the biggest bad games that people know is Quest 64. And
That's because there was nothing else for the system.
There are
exactly.
people who unironically like this game.
Yeah. But it's a bad video game. You could ask people, do you like Quest
this game?
64?
Is this
Yeah.
game
Or
good? No.
do you like Quest 64? Yes. Is it a good game? No. So I don't know. To me, it's the only game that I felt confident was an infamously bad enough game to fit the block. They did. It's weird to me that they went out of their way to do the Game Boy one instead of doing the N64 one at a similar time commitment.
Yeah, like the real reason I didn't take it was just it felt like they went out of their way to take Quest Brian's Story or whatever it was, the Game Boy one last year, the like supposedly better Quest game. And that to me is just like,
If you're not taking it, then why are you? When
so
are you
many
going
times?
to?
It's like, yeah. Do they just really not want to do Quest 64? They can do it eventually. It is a game with notoriety. I just have to see when they actually do it.
Yeah. So this is one of those like little just hunches on my part that it's time for them to do that, because if you look at my silly block, I've got like 4 games and that's it. And it was the only game that I felt really filled it out in a way that I thought would be satisfactory and that would guarantee people would still watch during it. It was kind of my goal. So, and then Sonic Chronicles. This is Osey and I's quote-unquote keynote game. I don't know if it's as good a keynote game as they've had in the past. It's not as blatantly bad as something like, your Lunar Dragon Song, the Demon Rush.
This game bricked my friend's DS. Game bricked my friend's DS. It's dog shit.
I mean, the worst thing I can say that comes across in the speedrun is that the music sucks, which for a Sonic game to have bad music is like the ultimate sin.
Let me put it to you this way: this game, I think, is fits even more so than Lunar, because Lunar Dragon Song had it even back then kind of still had an elite fan base. Sonic was still good, was still pretty relevant, will always stay relevant, and it has a much bigger fan base. This game comes around, people fucking was so upset around this time because
people were excited when this game was announced. When they said BioWare was making a Sonic RPG, like,
I say this game has infinitely more freaking notoriety with it than Lunar Dragon Song does.
Yeah, it has that going for it. Like I said, my biggest problem with it is that it's not blatantly bad. Like, it's bad, but like, I don't look at this and laugh like I do with like Lunar Dragon Song. Like, oh my god, running hurts you. So, I don't know. It's the only game that, like I said, I want. To me, if you're doing a silly block and you don't have a game that makes people go, oh my god, I'm so excited to see this. This game was atrocious. You don't have a silly block, and this is the only game that made me think they could have a silly block this year. But that is like that's partly a personal thing. Like, that's how I want to build my schedules, and so it's the best one to me.
Yeah.
So yeah. On the plus side, I think, is Cream used in the run, or is it just Big? I think Big. I know Big is used. It's like Big and Omega. I want to say.
Cream. No. Omega is optional.
Oh, Omega's optional? Okay. Maybe it is Big and Cream.
Yeah,
it's
no. I know that Cream gets used because she has some of the best like skills in the game, and I know Big gets used because he's got like a really good area of effect attack.
Okay, Omega's optional, so I'm getting them mixed. Okay, cool. So yeah. Anyways, that kind of covers my thoughts on Silly. Do you guys have anything else you guys want to add?
I did. There's one other game I did want to mention. There was an offer by Chaos for Unlimited Saga, which I'm not really sure where exactly that would best go, but that game is infamous for a weird reason, in that it's liked in Japan, hated in the West because it's needlessly complicated. Chaos unironically likes that game, and I don't even know where exactly I would put that between like Misk Square and silly, but I ended up thinking higher about the other two sagas that I had taken. But that was the game that killed that franchise in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It took a long time for Saga to recover from that game, and it is just a mess. I ultimately left it off because his PV is a substantial amount behind the record, but I would not be shocked to see that one get in.
Yeah.
It would be an experience for sure.
All right, that is that.
So moving on, we got our miscellaneous SNES picks. So this is pretty much anything that's on the Super Nintendo that wasn't made by Square except for Secret of Mana.
We wanted 3 games to a slide. That's what I've been saying.
So yeah, we.
God, I can't even look at that picture.
It's the most
No,
disgustingly terrible. Like, this
Image
is
is
a
cursed.
sin against humanity. That's all I'm going to say. Palmer, you should feel bad. You murdered a beautiful thing.
My OCD wants me to correct that triangle so bad.
Alright, so to start off with, we all agreed Secret of Mana. It's been a long time since they did. This is the Mana game by far. They've kind of tiptoed around it a little bit. I don't know if that's necessarily the right term, but they've kind of wanted to go in different directions before they did. Adventures of Mana last year, they did a full 4-hour Legend of Mana in 2018. I feel like they're eventually gonna, take Secret of Mana again. There was an offer for the 2018 version, but I felt like the time to strike on that one was last year.
For some reason, like, the 2018 version came and went, and no one seemed to really care. I think the one thing it does have is that it's a translation that wasn't done in 4 months. It's like they retranslated the game. It's like, because from what I understand, like Secret of Mana's story on the SNES version is supposed to be good, but kind of like very, very vanilla, and like the Japanese version had a lot more nuance. But like everyone likes the SNES version of the game much better. And it's one of those things like the glitchless co-op. They should do it eventually. I think we had it last year. They didn't take it. Hopefully, if we're right this year, they'll take it.
This is like, I think, the second or third time we've taken this in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say this much about Secret of Mana. I know that the runners particularly have been really pushing to do glitchless. Like that category more than any other is the one they really want to show.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder. Like, I'd be curious to see. I'll be interested to see if they actually take this or not. It might be one of the few, like, quote-unquote community type pitches that they've kind of not taken. Interestingly enough.
I think this one actually stands an oddly high chance because so the trilogy came out on Switch within the last year, and the Trials of Mana remake comes out like 2 weeks before this marathon. So Mana hype will be a little bit. So I think this would be the best Mana game to get in on that.
Yeah, I was also gonna say, like, the other thing is that I think they've had issues getting like a really good like co-op VOD, which I think they finally actually sorted out. Like, I think they just recorded a run at like the last limit break. So they actually have that fixed, and that might have been the thing that actually held them out. Is the committee wasn't actually comfortable with their estimates, not knowing how long this would actually take to do. So, I don't know. I think it's pretty likely still, but they could definitely go a different direction. And then GK and I both took Terranigma. This would be the first time they did it since, I believe, the second one?
Third. So here's the weird thing about this one. Among the Quintet Soul Blazer trilogy, this one in North America is
Non-existent.
by far the most quiet. It has a bit of a cult fan following because it has a massive reputation elsewhere, but its massive reputation lies primarily in Europe. Like, this game is the Chrono Trigger in Europe because they didn't have Chrono Trigger, and they love this game. Zadix is a absolute beast at this game. He's been working on this one for a very long time. We thought they'd consider also doing Magirock, which is the game's sort of 100% category, but that one's Japan only, whereas this one they can do the 60 hertz English patch. So it's take your pick on that one, but this game is really, really popular in Europe, and I feel like they want to give this one another go this year. If not this year, then soon.
And then Ozzy, you said Lufia and the Fortress of Doom, new game, JP.
Yeah. My reasons for taking it was because the game itself, well, it's one of those games that's really, really easy to digest alongside Elmegas, who helps ease that digestion along. Like, you just get that nice combination of things going on that made me want to take it over something like Terra Enigma, which I always figured Terra Enigma was, like, is not an easy to digest game. There's a lot of things going on to it that bear explaining that are very unconventional. And that's kind of my thought process when I took that. Because I didn't see anything else SNES related, and I knew I wanted to take something from the SNES that wasn't Secret of Mana only. And that's ultimately what I went with. Plus, it saved me 35 minutes somewhere else.
Yeah, the weird thing about Lufia 1 in particular, again, it has to be done in Japanese for the most part for the marathon. And then 2 it's not really as, like, it's not a very well-regarded game compared to its sequel. From what I understand, it's kind of just the most generic Dragon Quest clone ever. Maybe not ever, but, like, it's a very generic game in comparison. So I don't feel like amazing taking a game that's Japanese only for 3 hours, even if, like, again, it's a great runner and it's easy to digest. But, I mean, it's also, like, they've done Lufia 2 plenty of times in the past. It's a series that has a lot of nostalgia for people and it's done very well, but I don't know.
I'm also, the other thing that maybe that I nearly forgot is we know that Elmegas is staff. Sometimes they'll take a staff run just for flexibility to help fill in like an awkward day, awkward schedule, and stuff like that.
If they do that, it usually ends up on backup. Like, I could see this easily on the backup list for sure.
Well, absolutely, but I wouldn't be surprised if it got it anyway.
I wouldn't say I would be surprised. I'm not predicting it.
Yeah.
Same.
So.
Yeah. This is my prediction just based on what the kind of overall like feeling I have, and it's a gut feeling more than anything else.
All right. Next up, we got another category. This one is indie. Indie games at Limit Break. These tend to be a category we get wrong a lot. For lack of a better term. They'll do, 3, maybe 4 of these a year. And they're kind of all over the place. A lot of times we won't predict them. This is just kind of one of the weirder categories to try to call properly. I don't know, do you agree, GK and Ozzy?
Yeah, this is just a hard one to get.
And there's actually a lot of really good games this year for it. Like,
we were pretty divisive.
We were pretty divided, yeah.
You don't say.
Okay, the one we all agree on. So this is Paper Mario with.
Yeah, it is.
I run this game. I was one of the people who offered this.
So
I think this one is probably one of the better looking indie game offers that has like an actual unique runner. Joro has put in a lot of work in this game and gotten it down pretty good. It's everything you want from an RPG speedrun. You got combat strats that are unconventional, like poisoning yourself. You have skips all over the place, like small and big ones, without like completely destroying any integrity of the game. It's just a solid run. I like it.
It is curved pape in every way. Curve is an abbreviation for keeping it real fake, by the way. And I think the fact that they don't have a traditional Paper Mario game actually helps this a ton. Which is like a huge reason why I think this is getting in. Because if they don't have a traditional Paper Mario, this kind of lets you fill the traditional like niche of Paper Mario while still having Super Pape.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Then the only other game that there was any agreement on was SteamWorld Quest. This was me and GK.
So this one's a bit of a harder category to follow than most of the other games here, but the runners seem pretty cool to run. It's a game that just it's very like the skill is pretty obviously on display there with all the decision making that you have to do. They like to do like a sort of card game type RPG. Like we were completely caught off guard when they did Children of Zodiacs last year. I feel like this kind of hits a similar kind of niche.
I'd say maybe it's just the art style. I'd say this is more like the Earthlock run in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like it's a bit odd because it's a card RPG, which they don't have a lot of. And it's funny because I don't think I've ever seen GK do a 180 on a game as fast as he did with this one. Because your first response when I brought this game up was, nah, probably not. And then you took a peek, and then you kind of like looked away, and then I'm like, no, go back and watch it again. It's actually really like a solid watch. And so I think in that regard, for a game that maybe people didn't play as much, I don't know how well SteamWorld is actually sold.
It's a decently popular series. I think probably where I got on thinking of it as just being like a random spin-off to like I've seen SteamWorld runs and those have never really impressed me that much.
Yeah.
But
So-
it's a completely different kind of game.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I don't know. It's just an easy watch. It's very easy to see the skill in the game, and it brings a different energy. On top of, I think it's a game that they could get a dev call on. There's a couple of those, but like usually indie is where you could look to get those. So, and then we have our one of takes. Ozzy had Cat Quest 2. I believe it was Kizaron was the only one that offered.
Cat Quest 1 was backup last year. Cat Quest 2 is a solid run. It's a similar vein of just like cute little indie RPGs. Keys learned this for the show that he does on GDQ, and he liked it so much that he decided to optimize the game a little better. Not really much I can complain about with Kizaron getting a run in because he has a lot of solid offers in general.
Yeah.
Yes, he will be doing Pokemon Sword and Shield. I do like giving Keys like his own game to himself, where he can basically just get out there, do his thing. And this is not giving him we're not giving him another 5-hour run. It's just an hour and 15 minutes.
My main issue with that logic, and the reason I don't have it on my list, is that I also think you just have Keys do Battle Network or team up with Terrage for Battle Network, and at that point, you've got 3 runs for Keys, which I love Keys. It just seems like a lot of Keys for the marathon.
For me, I was thinking Taraj for Battle Network, but that's later.
Yeah. And then you also had Indivisible, which is really funny to me, considering you've never heard of this game until we showed you it for this.
Ghoul was high on this game at first.
I am still high on it, actually.
Here's the thing, right? Is literally when I was we were going over it, and I went to bed. I put it on and I watched the run, and I ended up really liking the run. And I think, obviously JT still has some improvement to be made in the run. I think that the rate of his progression leading up to the event could put on a very good showing here, because the game, it's made by the same people who made Skullgirls. Gordon.
I think this is the best possible. If they wanted a dev call, this is the best one you could get for sure. I'm still just a little bit off on the the time commitment a little bit, on top of the fact that the runner is a little bit behind.
There's a few other games that are probably more egregious than that on this list.
Probably,
so that's not a huge hang-up. My biggest issue is this run looks very similar to Valkyrie Profile, and I'm not sure how much the committee might, focus on that. Which is a little bit weird because, admittedly, this game would have a completely different audience because of its fandom from, what's the guy's name? Mike something? The guy who made this game?
Mike C.
Mike Z, yeah. So, Mike Z and fighting game fans who got...
Yeah, my
it's a
thing
weird
is,
audience for sure.
it is a weird audience, but man, when I watched this run, I was just impressed by not just the graphics, but also how it transitions combat to like the boss fights are extremely imaginative and inventive, and I love its presentation. And unlike Valkyrie Profile, this game also skips cutscenes. So sorry, Valkyrie Profile, I get bored.
Again, this is one of the it's a very very close game for me. Like, again, I've had this on and off my list I think 6 or 7 times. It's kind of comical how many times I've actually changed my list before I finally settled on one. It ended up being, again, one of the last ones off for me. Just
Hey,
a
you
little
both,
bit.
after I said we locked in, you both added things.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it might be a little bit of me, like, I predicted Crosscode last year for similar reasons as like the hottest new indie game, and I kind of got burned there. So maybe I thought a little bit of the same there, which is funny considering I took Crosscode again. I just kind of like the runner's time finally got down to the point where I consider it to be strong enough. I think that was the issue last year, and I still feel like this is a game that probably should be in at some point. But I don't know. I feel pretty solid on like that this gets in at some point. I feel like this is the year potentially, but it's admittedly one of my last games on as well. So we're talking about bubbles.
It was one of my last one, although that was more a consequence of how much time I had left. It's still a good run though.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a not like one of those skip everything runs, which I'm not sure how hot they are on, but they can do that.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, I don't feel all that confident on this. And again, indie is the place that we are perpetually very wrong. So take that as you will.
Yep.
Western Retro. So this is kind of like your advanced D&D games, kind of your Baldur's Gate type games.
You say that they had Baldur's Gate offered, just took it.
And there we are.
We'll talk about that. So, Diablo 2, one of the most famous games of all time. This run is one of the few Western RPGs that has actually historically done very well at Limit Break, so I think they can put this one back in. Some reservations about Blizzard notwithstanding.
You don't care about you just don't care about the drama with the company that makes the game. It's one of the best-selling games of all time, and this is the game that pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
For lack of a better term, this game makes money every time it's in a marathon. So at 3.5 hours, it's just such an easy watch and such an easy game to put in, and it will always have an audience in some form.
Yeah. To quickly go over my 2 things here, Pool of Radiance I think was a decent contrast to when they did AD&D last year, where this one's just a really short kind of just a race to the finish category. Loom is a bit of an odd one because it's more of a adventure game than it is an RPG. It's more of like one of those old school point and click type adventure games. It was on backup, it got in Questing for Glory, and there's a sizable community offer for this one. So I think it can get in on that basis. It's a bit of an odd one, but I feel like they're kind of wanting to extend a bone to the like adventure games, because a lot of those have things that later went into RPGs, and then there's a lot of people who offer these games, and they've had a hard time finding a place at any other marathon. But the biggest problem with them is they tend to not be the most engaging watches. This was like one of my very last editions. Some of that has to do with length, but I just had this hunch that I think they might take this one. And then finally, the Ultimas. So Ultima is, God, one of sadly the names lost to time a little bit in RPG history, because this is one of the most influential series of all time, and they have not had anything in this series in the Limit Break channel. I think they had like 1 or 2 runs at like a Questing for Glory, but that's like it. Yeah. Actually, I don't even think they've had that much, but yeah. Geyers offered Ultima 6. It's a glitchless 27-minute run that is super, super short.
It's a lot of value for your minutes too. So like 27 minutes getting in a game with as historic a name as Ultima, you gotta go.
And the
for
good
it.
Ultimas, not like the bad ones that killed the series. Ultima 4 is another one. Being this gets you a little bit of your NES, which there's not a whole lot of NES games being offered. Like being accepted to marathons in the past, so I think this hits on that old nostalgia. It's a solid enough run from everything I've seen it, and I think this is like the second most beloved Ultima after like 7, so yeah, there's no going wrong there in taking both of these.
And doing them even like back to back as a little mini block is totally viable. I feel like too.
Oh, it's easily something they would do.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers that. Western modern. So this is more like, you know, your Elder Scrolls, anything kind of made by BioWare in the last, 10-ish years, anything
20.
by...
This is like the last 20 years in a way.
Yeah,
I
like I said,
feel
categories are somewhat arbitrary again. Read the disclaimer.
Yeah, what defines retro and what defines modern is very subjective, especially as we keep getting into newer generations. It's like, PS2, is PS2 retro or is PS2 modern?
Yeah.
So partly we also did this to have 3 games in one slide. We could probably put Fable in either, because it's old enough, but it's also on an Xbox platform. Fable is probably the most simple case of a thing we've mentioned a few times. The runner for this game got it into Limit Break 2017, 2018, and just had to withdraw, I think, for financial reasons or something along those lines. And this is like, it's a show of good faith. Like, we'll take you again. It's a 90-minute run. It's pretty harmless. Popular series. Why not?
Yep. That's about as easy to explain as possible. Man, I took all of these, didn't I? So Divinity Original Sin, 15-minute run of a very popular game. I'd be a little bit worried that, like, it's too glitchy for what it is, but at the same time, like, if it doesn't, it's so harmless at 15 minutes. This is, like, the shortest game we took. Right? So...
besides FF3.
I mean, okay.
Yeah.
You're getting into semantics here. Like, the idea...
You could be... This game is just... This is one of the better selling games on Steam of all time. It's been shown at, like, GDQ, but that's been a while. I think we've called this to get into another GDQ, like, twice, and we were wrong about it, but, like, Limit Break, I think this has a good place. And it's also Railcoon, who I'm sure the committee trusts.
Yeah. And then lastly is Mass Effect, any % new game. It's one of the most, like, probably one of the biggest franchises of the PS360 generation. Kind of one of the biggest breakout franchises, Andromeda may have killed the series for now, but people still really like 1 and 2, and there's mixed opinions on 3.
Just the ending, really.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the ending.
Most people seem to be positive on 3, even if they don't rate it as high as the others.
Yeah.
The real problem, I think, with this game is, it's been concerned of whether Alec was ready to do this run, but I think is this game content. Like, I don't necessarily know if Nami wants to associate with the game that did admittedly generate its share of controversy and is probably one of the more violent games that they take in terms of what you see. It is it's like a third-person shooter with a lot of RPG stuff, and while the RPG stuff is present, it's kind of all over the place, genre-wise.
There's definitely a lot to be concerned about. Like, to me, one of the bigger concerns is just it's been offered and not taken, like, 3 years in a row, I want to say.
I want to say it's been offered longer.
Yeah, I mean, like...
Yeah.
And, like, some of that might be, again, the question of, Alec being practiced enough, which he definitely wasn't for 1 year. I think there's also, like, some questions of... I believe this was done at one of the an early GDQ and did not go over well. It has been since done and actually went over very well. I don't know if it's a difference in age and kind of how the events progressed, or people just kind of expect it. But a lot of Western RPGs tend to be very glitchy and broken. This game is no exception, and that can kind of lose some of the charm to the fan base you're trying to appeal to.
I think the other thing, too, with Western RPGs and why we have so few longer ones is Western RPGs tend to be, like, they tend to have a very short main quest and a lot of side content that you go do, whereas Japanese RPGs tend to be a bit more of a linear, long journey kind of thing. So JRPGs tend to be, like, of the 4 to 7 hour range, whereas Western tend to be, like, under 2.
Yeah, it's just a difference in design style for sure, where, yeah, the Western design is switched more towards open world, while Japanese is stuck to its kind of on-rails approach for sure.
Yeah, and I just think that I want to give this run a shot, it's still worth taking that chance. It's not the biggest loss in the world.
Yeah. So, okay. I think that pretty much covers our Western Modern. We have our one slide that's going to make GK's OCD go nuts because we have a slide with only 2 predictions on it in TaskBot.
The reason we have TaskBot being just two things here, he offered 3 games. One of them was a Zelda run, which they've never taken anything Zelda, so I don't think they're going to do. So, ultimately, TaskBot is kind of its own entity. So let's get started with the one that we all agreed with. Dragon Warrior 2. This game is fucking hard to run, like, as a human. It's like over a 4-hour run to be completable.
And the game could just say you lose at any given moment. It's really BS.
So to be able to do like one of those kind of crazy, just like beat the shit out of this game that's normally like really hard for people, that's kind of what TaskBot, one of the things that it's historically done.
I think it's a good follow-up to the Final Fantasy 1 run last year. I'm okay with this one.
Yeah. And this one okay, so hear me out here. Undertale as a task is not a great task. Overall, it's significantly faster than a real-time run, but like significant means like a few minutes because this game is like you're kind of optimizing small increments. This one, they do it on a like Linux emulator, so it ends up actually being pretty stable, so that concern isn't there. They've never had this game. They've probably wanted this game since like 2016.
Yeah.
There was the reservation back when Toby Fox, said, I don't want this game at marathons because I worried people spoiled. That's long since expired. GDQ's had it twice. Nobody's offered it to Limit Break since 2016. I feel like this would just be, they get a group of people, they play Undertale, everyone in chat reminisces about Undertale, people donate for the incentives, it's... If Limit Break is about reliving nostalgia, people already have a shit ton for this game. And I just have this feeling that they're going to end up taking it. Even if I don't necessarily... This was probably one of the few takes that I took the most, like, I'm not sure if I like this.
You feel dirty taking that?
This is my least favorite task offer, actually. Like, and don't get me wrong, like, taskers do incredible work, and the Undertale task is, very well made. It does everything well. You could get a True Pacifist run in, like, what's the marathon estimate for True Pacifist? 130?
130. Mm-hmm.
So you're
About
cutting
135.
10 minutes off for a TaskBot. So you're getting all the downsides of TaskBot with very few of the upside to me. So I don't think this really, like, this does nothing for me personally. And part of that might be I'm a little biased against TaskBot recently. I don't think that they need to do 2 of them, especially when one feels kind of as off-putting as this is to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think we're going to get TaskBot in there somehow. It's just a matter of
Dragon Warrior 2 is 100% happening, and it should. I think it's a great pick for the event. In the same way that Final Fantasy 1 was a fantastic pick for their first showing at the event. I just don't think Undertale works in any real form. They say, like, oh, well, they do fun stuff during the fights with where, the cursor moves to avoid attacks. And, like, that's cool, but I'm sure, like, real runners do that too. Like, you can have fun with that in a real person's run. I don't see what justifies an hour and 20 when you could have a person do it for an hour 30.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't been done by a person, which again is the reason you have it is because you feel like they just want this game somehow.
Yeah. If this was submitted in 2017, I would probably say 100%, even with that same, asterisk. It's just, I think the thing that kind of made me hold up on it is this game. While people fucking love this game, its ship has sailed a little bit.
Yeah, but it's had a
longer life than it's had a longer life than a lot of indie games, but I do think it's kind of faded from that like explosive popularity it originally had.
It has, but I mean, people still love this game. Like that's not the concern for me. It's just how similar this is to the RTA, and at that point, I want to see the RTA done. So,
right. Well, no, we can move on.
Yep. I think that's totally good.
So we're down to our last two sections. This one's a bit of a longer one.
So, miscellaneous. This is basically just anything that doesn't fit another category well.
Like that Beepo image that clearly doesn't fit.
God damn it, Ghoul. Stop with the Bevo.
How can you not love Bebo?
I don't watch the show.
So?
Same.
Okay. Anyways.
I'm
so
holding
get to
on
our
this as
last-
long as possible. Intentionally.
Hit the slit, dang it. Moving on. Come on, we got places to go, people to see.
Alright, so, again, just anything that didn't really feel like it fit somewhere else, which half the list is Falcom, which is hilarious.
Hey, we had... Okay, so here's... To justify my boner for Falcom. So, Legend of Heroes, I don't think that matters that that's Falcom. The original Dragon Slayer Legend of Heroes, I don't think that matters to Falcom. That voice acting is hilarious for anyone. Trails in the Sky, on the other hand. This is probably the closest thing to a compelling Trails offer that you're going to get, because this is like a on the rise, popular, beloved, people love the Trails series to death. More so than Falcom's other series, which is already one of the most beloved. East is one of the most beloved series out there amongst it. In its fan base, it is fucking yeah. And Trails somehow manages to go past that. The problem is a lot of the Trails runs have a very hard time getting into marathons. Zero and Ao are okay, but they're Japanese only, which is why I don't have Zero on here. And Trails of Cold Steel is, kind of hard to watch if you're not familiar with it, because you skip almost everything.
Watching
Fortunately-
fights, you just see numbers and things kind of randomly die, and you don't really know why they happen. This is speaking from someone that's an outsider to the series. Trails in the Sky kind of hits this middle ground where it's very, very watchable as someone that's never played a game in the series.
Mm-hmm. And Mixed Turbo speeds up the So the thing with the Mixed Turbo, explain what this means. The game has a few different turbo settings that you can use. There is one for battle and one for other stuff. What they're doing is fast forwarding through the cutscenes so that those move a little bit faster, and then battle speed is twice as fast, if not more. It's still very much followable, and it gets rid of one of the problems with a lot of turbo runs, which is that you just move ridiculously fast, and it ends up looking clumsy because you're just bonking into walls because you're moving so fast. It also gets rid of some of the glitches that happen, because when you play the game on turbo, you can just bypass certain triggers unintentionally. It's really, really awkward and janky to watch. But admittedly, this is probably a very arbitrary category, so I could see them, just leaving it on the table there. I do think that this is the ideal way to get this game in the marathon somehow, and I can't think of anything better that they would do short of Zero finally getting localized, which even then, I still think this is a better run, and people really fucking love this game.
Yeah,
I'm just so hesitant on that 4.5 hours for a game that I'm not 100% sure they would consider that strongly.
Yeah. The problem is, without the Mixed Turbo, it's a 7-hour run, and I don't see that being particularly likely. Going on to the other Falcom, East 1 and 2, we all seem to agree. That's mainly the community pitch. Very classic game, very big community pitch.
Yep. It's short, it's easy to watch, and a whole community offered it.
Yeah, and it was a relay race, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and as we said before, we've seen them take races to just get some variance to their schedule. I think they'll pick this up as a race, no problem.
So, I'll explain my run here of East Origin simply. East Origin is probably the closest thing to a pure raw speed game of any of the games that they have. As far as just the dynamic movement, the skips, it doesn't have kind of the slow, methodical pace that a lot of RPGs have, and even a lot of action RPGs have. It's just, you're just going full throttle the entire way. And this category actually eliminates one of the biggest problems with this game, or mitigates it, which is that this game has a lot of cutscenes. PS4 actually plays half the cutscene speed. I offered multiple categories for this game. I think this one would be the one that they would take, just because it's the most different. Because I've always done Toll, and Unica gives a different flavor, as well as this being the most popular East game, and her being the character that almost everyone played.
Yeah.
When they played this game. So not really a whole lot not really a whole lot to explain there. I could see them leaving it off if they want, if they think they have enough Falcom with Trails and East
or
1
if
and
there's
2. I
just,
think
like,
the 1 and 2 offers a little better, just given the community pitch, but
I mean, it's one of those things. It's a game that never hurts to be in the marathon, just because it is such a natural speed run to watch. Which the nice thing that East has is that relative to its like core audience size, it's one of the easiest games to watch, even if you haven't played them. It's just a very basic, fast action RPG, which are always like the easiest ones to watch. If you haven't seen like a Final Fantasy or an SMT game, maybe you don't understand the combat. You see them whack someone with a Keyblade in Kingdom Hearts or slash them with a sword in something, you kind of see the skill there. So, and then for the stuff that I guess we still had Newtopia 2, GK and Aussie, 100%, 125. This is just a follow-up to Newtopia 1. For y'all, this is another game. I feel bad that I left this off. I think I just missed it, and I never found room to put it back in. To be honest.
So Newtopia is just it's a good solid run. It's very short. It far exceeds its name. It did very well for donations in pretty much every marathon I've seen it in, which is a little bit surprising, given the game's relative obscurity. So I guess there's some kind of nostalgia for it, but also it's a fairly easy watch, being that in the words of Vanny, Zelda clone of this game. But yeah, Vanny does very good with marathons as well, so I definitely think they would give him an encore with this one.
Yeah, this is one I'd be happy to be wrong on.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way.
More or less what you said. Everything I was going to say with this run goes.
And then we have 2 picks that GK took by himself.
So Child of Light, I just have this hunch. They put it on Backup last year. They seem to really, really like this game. And Kay is a very, very, very wholesome and very likable individual, so I can definitely see them giving her a run of this. This is one of my very, very last ones. And then Magic of Sherazade. So this game was a backup, I think, in the first Limit Break, if not an accept that withdrew. And there's like 3 people offering, so it gives that like NES nostalgia to it. Like there's some very strong like NES offers that aren't just like bad. Like Deadly Towers is like a bad game, but like you have Magic of Sherazade, you have Ultima 4 for the NES. Like you have some really solid NES offers here that aren't just Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. And then finally, Battle Network 2, which we all took. We kind of glossed over.
Yeah, I think the only difference between the 3 of us is I have it in my my schedule planning was Taraj running this. Well, it sounded like you guys were keys were on.
We
I have co-op. I have them both, like either passing controller or racing or doing something.
Yeah, for different categories. I guess we didn't actually split it on the layout. I have Taraj's single segment, which uses far fewer like ridiculous manipulations and relies on core game knowledge. Taraj is a great runner, and he's probably one of the more well-liked people amongst the people that know him at these events. You'd have keys on the couch for sure.
Yeah.
Or almost for sure, because I know the 2 of those guys get along. But it could be no major glitches, which is done on English. It could be single segment, which is 15 minutes longer. It's really take your pick on that one. I just don't see them likely to do any % Japan for only 5 minutes of time save.
Could be. I don't know.
All right.
It's kind of all of our picks for the Mega Man. They have a lot of options. That could be one that could go a different direction as well. I wouldn't be surprised. Other games and points of discussion. So this is just kind of stuff we didn't take that we kind of...
Wait, we're at the end? What time is it?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
a reminder that a shorter games list used to take us about 5 hours to go through. If you're wondering why our predictions format changed so much from year to year. I wish we could still do kind of the older style, but it's very hard to justify it for 400 some games.
Yeah, it's hard for us to do that many. I also just think that even people who enjoy these shows thank you guys for watching. Like, we're doing this for fun. We're not trying to shit on anyone here. We're doing this because we love the event. We love RPG runs. We want to celebrate them in a way that we can, and we're glad to have you along for the ride. But I don't think anyone here really wants to sit and listen to us for 7 hours.
Except it would be more like 10 with the way it's been going.
Hmm.
Yep.
Uncool mode. So the first thing I want to point out, if you see what we got here, there was a pair of people offering Pokemon trading card game, and the immediate thought when somebody offers something like Pokemon trading card game is like, is that really something viable for Limit Break? And I think, hell's yes, Limit Break should take Pokemon TCG at some point. I don't know if the offers were quite as strong this year. Both runners who offered were quite a ways up on a game that's very optimization heavy, but it's also very random. So, you know, I would not be shocked to see this. Pokemon TCG is an RPG, just like it has the go to the 8 gyms, beat the final boss. Your form of progression is just cards.
Yeah, you level up by getting packs. Yeah, let's see. Let's see if I marked. We talked about that. That actually ended up being on my list. A couple games, like one of my last ones off was Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. It's a very weird, like as far as like sheer size of the games that were offered, I think Gen U might be one of the largest games that ended up not on the list. I think the weirdest thing with it is it's just a little bit hard to know if they would consider this enough of an RPG to do it in the main event. On top of kind of, the category is hard to define.
That's a game that it's really hard just to set an end goal, so it ends up being really arbitrary and cuts off as, like, we do a boss rush for this, like, one objective. It's a partial game category that actually makes sense, but it is still a partial game category, and they said that they're willing to take those, but they're a little bit less likely to take them.
Yeah. And then, that's actually it for my...
I have a few. Ozzy and I actually both... So, we both saw the Skies of Arcadia, a Legends offer, which was a fairly big community pitch, which ultimately 11.5 hours is a very long time. It took them a lot of time to even take FF10, and this game just feels a little too obscure for me to ever predict that this one gets in. But there's a group of people who love this game. It's a very unique RPG, and it's cool seeing like a community pitch for something like that. You don't see community pitches for games that long very often.
Nah, it's very rare.
No. It's very rare. The game does have its cult following. The game itself has that. It's one of those, like, for me, this is the other Sega RPG that I think people really, truly love that isn't named Phantasy Star.
Mm-hmm. There was a Witcher 3 offer by Andy. Andy's time wasn't great, and I thought it was weird that they didn't get into Questing for Glory, so I have to wonder if the run isn't quite as great, like as the game's popularity suggests, if it has content concerns. And also Andy Perfect's on the Dragon Quest XI thing, so we felt like they don't feel like they have to reach to get him a run.
People asked about Crystal Bearers a lot. To me, it's just too long for what it is. I love Palmer. He is the biggest dork to ever grace this earth. And at the same time, like, and the pitch is hilarious. The game isn't going to hold my interest for 3 hours, I don't think, when he's already can have him just do Parasite Eve, which is a very safe, very strong take. So, like, that's my thought process on it. You know, Crystal Bearers, to me, if you're doing Crystal Chronicles, I think you go back to the original. Crystal Bearers never really caught on, and for good reason.
I think the other two games I have a few games I have a note here. I talked about Unlimited Saga. I think we talked a little bit about Full Metal Alchemist.
Speaking of a game that I want to talk about, Blue Reflection is awesome, and I wish Pete had a little more time to get the game ready. But in its current state, it's just not ready to be shown by him there, I don't think.
So there's two other ones I did want to talk about. Dot Hack Mutation, offered by Mumu. Great guy. Would love to see him get that in. That's one that could get in. None of us took it because it's a harder, more volatile run than the first one, and that's saying something with that. But also, it feels like the first time they took it, it was a big community pitch. People like Dot Hack. It's not necessarily something you kind of have to repeat. It's not a franchise that has like several games that people go to like, oh, I love this game, I love this game. A lot of people played Infection, then Mutation like came kind of after, and there was a bit of a falling off. And then by the time you get to like 3 and 4, like the kind of initial wave died out.
The print runs of those games didn't help either. There's a reason those games are over $100 each now. But yeah, the other issue with Mutation is it's much less safe than Infection. So there's like a very high chance of having to do a safety save load like within the first, I think even like the first 30 minutes of the run. So
then
I got two things two personal games I want to bring up. First, I'll say Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2. Thank you for offering this game, because I never knew this game existed till now.
Yeah, it was a partial category, and it doesn't seem like a partial category that's like the thing is, the reason the Tactics Advance games tend to be offered partial categories is because there's a lot of grinding at the mid portions of them. That being said, I don't see it for that one.
Yeah, and the other game is something I truly wish they would accept, but I just don't have the faith that they would. Like it's just too volatile, and that's Dokapon Kingdom. It is literally the epitome of volatile speedrunning.
You guys and your Dokapon.
I think Dokapon, honestly, like if you're going for a silly block keynote, there's a chance you could do Dokapon as your keynote game.
Yeah, I know Darkwing's wanted to get that in.
It's my biggest issue is I have no idea how marathon safe that run would be.
That's just it. It would be, like I said, it's volatile, but man, does it just strike every note that you would really want in a good silly block game? It's a funny parody that's super unique and wholly original, with so many in jokes and just little subtle RPG jokes thrown in there. It's everything I want, but it's also Mario Party.
GDQ hasn't taken Mario Party. Actually, I have a couple other things. I think we did briefly mention Adventure Time. There's an Adventure Time game that's surprisingly enjoyable. I feel like the committee probably doesn't really might not get the sense of humor, because this is a cartoon that came out in the late 2000s, mid 2010s. So its sense of humor is a little bizarre and millennial, but a run has a lot of what you like in runs. So that one might catch the eye. Like that might be a backup consideration, or possibly a dark horse pick to get in. And then Astral Chain, which we didn't end up taking because Swift Shadows would also do KH3, and they tend to not want to double up 3-hour runs for people, but it wouldn't be unheard of for them to do that. And Astral Chain was a pretty modest success, and I know that Swift Shadow would love to run that game. It's a bit on the adjacent side for sure, though. Like, I think this would be the right environment for it, but I'm not necessarily convinced that it's quite the right run for this marathon. They would have to tell me that they feel that way first.
I do have one, because I'll shout it out for you, Ghost, but I secretly still hope they'll consider and possibly take Rocket Slime.
I love Rocket Slime. People say positive things about it every time I hear it. Never predict it. It's very much on the
adjacent side. It's got one of the best skip histories too.
Oh my god, I love that skip. Random guy comes into my stream after holding on to info of that game for over a decade. When I finish a run, he's like, "Hey, I got to skip." He's like, "I got to skip for you." Okay, show me. And then he's like, "Go here, do this," and then the skip works. There's no explanation for why it works. I'm like, "Why does this work? How does this work? What the hell?"
It also looks like he just arbitrarily warped too, just 2 screens away. That was really funny.
Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about, I think, the biggest offer that was submitted here the biggest offer that we didn't talk about that was submitted here was there's a big community pitch for a Kefka Narsh tutorial.
Yeah.
So
it's
So here's kind of our reservation. The thing that's made the Strider I think after the Strider tutorial at AGQ, a lot of marathon people have been trying to get something like that in. And the thing that makes Strider work is it's really short, it's visually interesting, and a lot of the tricks about it that look really cool are actually really easy to teach people. Darkman also had an impressive history of just teaching this to dozens and dozens of people at GDQ. That was kind of a unique case. For something like Limit Break, a 2-hour showcase of Kefka at Narsh is not quite in that same boat, I feel like. I do think it does have that kind of upside, but that is blowing 2 hours of your marathon on something that I'm not really sure what it does for raising money. And while that's not necessarily the purpose, as the run gets longer, I'm not necessarily sure this is something that really easily communicates something special to an audience, because Kefka at Narsh is a fairly basic, simple category to learn. It doesn't have the step route, I don't think.
You couldn't do a step route in a tutorial like that. There's just no way it would be feasible. I would be concerned with how well something like that would go over with chat. It's one of those things that could be a really cool experience. I think it'd be a great thing to do just in the practice room, just get a big group of people and have everyone learn how to do the same run. That sounds like a really cool 2-hour event thing to do at the event itself. I just don't know how well that translates to the stream. When again, you're already doing Final Fantasy VI in another form if they're doing the relay, and it's a partial category. There's just a lot of questions I have with that.
Especially when you add in naming each character, that also feels like that would drag in. I do really like that the suplex incentive is there, but again, if that's it, it would be a little awkward to make the suplex the train incentive a thing to do twice if they do end up going with the relay, and then that would just be a lot of FF6.
Yeah, and then you're also you're doing the tutorial and you're also having people do stuff they wouldn't normally do if you're having the suplex the train. I don't know. It's just awkward for me, and I don't like. It's one of the few community pitches that I don't know how to feel about.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. It's hard to call, but I will say I do actually think that there is a significant potential upside for this thing. And best case scenario, we have something like the Strider thing that happened, that it does inspire people to run these games.
Yeah, I think
Narsh is a really popular category. Although I think kind of what rubs me off on it is it's not even the full game for that.
I think to me the dream game to do this would be a no save corruption run in Pokemon Blue, where it's short enough, the game is popular enough, and it's kind of one of those really cool party trick runs that when people know how to do it, it would work really well. I'm not sure. I think FF6 is the right game for something like that, and that could be me.
For me, it's the ease of getting into the amount of things that they're in a FF6 Kefka Narsh run is infinitely more complex than the Pokemon ID would.
One thing we didn't talk about at all, I guess we can go over real quick. We don't have any Earthbound.
No.
That might be a mistake. Just saying.
It's just very hard to know where they would go with Earthbound from here. It kind of feels like they've done everything.
They've done the photo percent, which is the hybrid glitch but not super glitch category. They've done any percent, which is the mega glitch category. They've done glitchless twice. The runner who offered glitchless, his time isn't quite as great, and I feel like Earthbound is one of those games that's been in so many times that they kind of have a pedigree that they expect top 5 runners, sub 345 in glitchless. So that was our concern there. So some of the arbitrary side categories, and then there's a 3-way ancient cave, and I'm really not fond of loading zone types of randomizers, because those just become insanely hard to follow, especially when you have a 2 or 3 person race.
Yeah.
And then there's also Mother 3, which perennially gets offered.
If Mother 3 gets in, I'll let them surprise me. The only way that I will ever probably predict Mother 3 is if the long-rumored English translation that Nintendo supposedly had for the Wii U ever surfaces again. So, there's good and bad to it. It's a very beloved game. People adore the crap out of the game. I need to see the game in English before I would predict it, and they'll have to surprise me before then.
Especially a game like the Mother series, which are extremely text heavy.
Yeah.
Alright. I think we can wrap this up. Thanks everyone for watching. If we didn't get to your game, it means we hate your game and it's not getting. No, it does. It means we're probably idiots.
Yeah, again, like, this is all just, speculation by people that don't know anything more about the committee, their thought process than anyone else. This is entirely, us looking at the runs ourselves, trying to look at past games lists, trying to look at data that we can between donation numbers, between their YouTube views, their likes, things like that. We do whatever we can to try to get, what we feel is as big picture as possible. And even then, this isn't easy. This is so hard.
Yeah, and the thing is that I personally believe that the committee puts in a lot more hours and a lot more effort into this than we do.
Easily.
We do this for fun, and yeah, we're still making educated guesses, and I guarantee you we're going to be less than 50% right.
No, I mean, go ahead.
It's just what I personally feel, because just so much variance in our selections.
And there's not even a wrong direction to go. Like, we said it, last year it was really funny because depending on what you took from, or was it 2 years ago? Depending on what you took from Bowie depended on where the entire event went.
Yeah.
And none of those were bad directions or the wrong thing to do. It's just that's the direction you went. And
yeah,
there's a lot of that when you do this. And
you got guys like Zeal here who has 4 runs that they could all take. Like, he has FF7 and Secret Mana, which we took and we felt were a little bit stronger about, but he has Breath of Fire 3, which is a bit of an off chance what they could do. He has Secret of Evermore, like they could do a 3-way community thing with that. Like they haven't had that one in a while. Like there are some people who they have like lengthy runs. Like if Swift Shadow does, Astral Chain, they'd also take KH3, stuff like that.
But yeah, so like even if our list doesn't match at all, I don't feel like it's because our list was bad or because the games list is bad or anything like that. It's just you can do so many different things, and making these lists is objectively really, really hard.
Yeah, you're gonna end up saying no to something that every committee will always end up saying something that they wanted, and they have so many things in here that at least one person on the committee, I'm sure, absolutely wants. Like I said it outright. I think this is probably the best block of submissions for Limit Break that they've had, and this is after they've had 5 years of runs that I can say like, they've already had this. I think this takes a break.
Yeah, and again, if we didn't talk about your game or we didn't take it, they have to cut down the number of categories offered to 1/10 of what they have. And it's just very, very difficult, so I don't know.
I think our combined count for all unique categories was, I'm looking at this sheet, it says 361. We probably missed 1 or 2, so like just say 360. They tend to only take about 50. So it's not quite 1/10, but that's like just over an 1/8.
I mean, it's 1/10 by hours.
1/10 by hours and over an 1/8 by just volume.
But yeah, it's a lot. So
I'm still remembering when you were considering putting up that picture that person made of like the dead Yamcha cake.
Oh god, he should show it anyway. That thing needs to be shown.
I always joke because I leave this slide on here because this is from the GDQ ones we do. And for our miss category in that, we had different pictures of Yamcha, like, smiling, doing other things, and then him getting grabbed by the Cyberman, and then the closing thoughts one was dead Yamcha in the corner.
We love our DBZ, okay?
But yep.
Alright. I truly hope you guys enjoyed watching, because I did not expect this to go. But I truly expect this to take 4 hours.
So we'll post our individual lists like in a like Paceman kind of dump sometime soon. I
In the
think
near,
Ghoul, you
very
wanna do
very
that?
near future. We'll come up with some stakes
Yeah,
for
we don't exactly have a bet this year.